Good afternoon, and welcome to the November 6th meeting, regular monthly meeting of the Budget Committee.
November 8th.
Oh, yes, it's November 8th, the day after Election Day. So anyway, our first item on the agenda is an executive session to discuss the case Tobin versus Town of Greenwich. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second.
Motion made by Leslie Moriarty, second by Nisha Arora. Those in favor? 400 at 1:06. So I need to tell the public that because of our television program today, when we go into executive session, the audience is going to see a blue screen. So we're going into executive session now. Thank you. So, good afternoon. We're going to continue our meeting. We came out of executive session with a motion from Leslie Moriarty, second by Nisha Arora at 1:18, and that was unanimous. So our next item on the agenda is Health Department 2. It's a approval to use Public Act funds. It's a grant, and it's $122,582. So we have Caroline Baisley and team coming to present this grant to us today. So Caroline, you're a master
afternoon.
of getting grants. Thank you.
Yes, grants. This one was a hard one. Good afternoon. To my right, I have Matt Anginato. He's our business director, and I'm going to let him do some of the talking. I'm just breaking him in. And then to my far right is the operations director for the Department of Health, also in the training mode as well. So this grant is the routine Public Act grant, $122,582. I think it's almost the same amount that we got last year. We always try to do our best to get as much as we can out of that money. And it's a lot of money because of restrictions that we have with the state in order to do that. So I'm going to let Matt go through the actual application with you, starting with the professional and other special services. And then you can ask him questions.
Thank you, Caroline. And thank you to the board for hearing us out and always being supportive. Appreciate it. The first order of business for the Public Act grant that we see on the top of our agenda here, justification, explanation, is the professional and other special services category. Those are basically, first we've allocated $4,800, as you can see to the right, for a professional medical consultant, basically to assist the department with our HIV program, our STD program, bloodborne pathogen program, et cetera. We've done this in the past, so it's really nothing new, and we're applying again this year. Followed by a subcontractor, we have hired a new dietitian for the department to come on board. There's several 6-week sessions involved. It's a minimal amount of money, but it's a nice addition to the department and our initiative for diabetes. Next down the list is temporary services. We continue to employ a part-time billing specialist that assists me part-time. She handles inter-office billing with Medicare and private insurance. She also handles any billable services that come into the business office for vaccinations and overall expenditures for the department. It's a very useful part-timer, in my opinion. Next, we have an administrative staff assistant, which is going to be a new hire for the lab. We foresee a hire coming in soon, and we're looking forward to getting that person on board to assist with the lab, since the lab's doing great. Just exclusively for the lab. The fringe benefits that we applied for below for $4,239.82 is for Social Security benefits, for the 2 part-time staff members listed above. Next, we have office services in the Public Act grant. A large chunk of it is legal advertising. We used Hearst Media and the Greenwich Time, both in print and digitally, to really promote a lot of our programs, health education programs, lectures. In print, we do that several times a month in the Greenwich Time, and there's also a digital spot once a month to really show off what we do here in Greenwich and in our department. Next, we use it's really a network called Ability. It helps us manage our eligibility for claims and tracking of these claims. These funds will be used to really to assist the department for third-party billing in that essence for Medicare and other insurances. So it's a crucial funding for that area. Next, we see a category of mailing. There we'll be using some funds to do mailing. It really enables the department to mail out pieces of information to the community for important programs that we run. We also use it for some confidential mailings of blood test results that we do in-house. WGCH Media is a category which we need some funding approved. It really enables us to provide effective health messaging on specific topics to the community. For example, messaging on breast cancer awareness, dental hygiene month, Mental Health Awareness Day, and various initiatives in which we feel are very important to run a successful health department. Next, we see Verizon Wireless. That's really our data plans for our environmental department. We have 4 iPads that we use in the field. They use this for inspecting of licensed facilities in operations such as food service establishments, etc., beauty care facilities, indoor-outdoor sporting facilities. So the iPads are crucial for them to perform their duties. Next, we see the public health education materials for $10,000. These funds will be issued to allow the departments to duplicate written public health education materials from State Health Department and CDC. We also send these out to the Board of Education for duplicating of paper, as well as we use Alpha Graphics, which is a local printing company. A large category of the funding we see next is for our supplies and equipment, of course, to run our health department. A lot of this is, some of it is office supplies, I should say. We have envelopes that we need for mailings. We do decals. Coming up, we're initiating some decals out for certain regulation and enforcement programs, i.e. the landscaping and the noise initiatives that we know about. So that's a new initiative we're looking forward to taking on. We need 6 new sandwich boards, which we use for various applications around town. Last time was like flu clinic, stuff like that. And a lot of our sandwich boards have seen better days, so we're going to be purchasing some new ones with your approval. We are going to be also purchasing some food temperature magnets. This is a normal thing for us, for food license providers to have in their stores and their restaurants. It's for serving temperatures and reheating temperatures and stuff like that, so that there's guidelines.
New FDA code.
And it's a new FDA code. Thank you, Caroline. A large chunk of the $26,877 that we are asking for to use is for equipment for our lab and medical supplies to run our health department. We want to buy a DSLR camera with the money. We want to take pictures of tick test results so that we can analyze and put on file proof of testing procedures and results. And we think a camera would fit that nicely. We're going to be purchasing an Abbott cholesterol analyzer, which will provide accurate, achievable, and readily accessible results for lipid profile, cholesterol, and glucose testing.
That's going to take the place of it. I already have that in there.
Next, we're going to be purchasing a Lead Care 2 analyzer, which will be used to screen children for lead in their blood for children's clinics that we run. We would like to get a Fisher dissolve, it's a DO meter, a dissolved oxygen meter, which it's really for water quality in the field. Again, with environmental, they do testing and the lab. So they'll be doing, getting field kits, which will measure that sort of thing. Not really my area of expertise, but it is something that they need. Dental portable chair for an elementary school. We're looking to purchase an additional one because it's needed at this time. We're just short a chair, so we'd like to add one to our inventory. We'd like to purchase a portable autoclave classics. Actually, we're going to be getting 3 of them. This equipment will be used in the dental health program to sterilize tools used in dental screenings in public schools. Every year we get fluoride varnish, so the varnish is listed there. It helps the eligible students in public school systems, which strengthens tooth enamel and prevents incidents of cavities. Toothbrushes we give out to the kids, so that's listed there. This category also encompasses radon testing and water testing, so there's equipment included there as well. I'll just touch briefly on it. We get some S chambers, which is for home radon testing, so we purchase those. For tick testing, we get something called tick tweezers, so we need a lot of those, 10 cases of those. And for water testing, basically the lab gets chemicals and different testing procedures to round out their capabilities in the lab.
So thank you very much, Matt. Do we have any questions? There's a lot of detail. Laura?
Yeah, thank you for the thorough presentation. Just a general question, are these grant proceeds being used sort of in keeping with your use in past years, or is there any new initiative or anything new you're doing here?
Mostly all the
Use the mic, Karen. You have to use the mic.
equipment that, mostly all the equipment is replacing the older equipment that we have with new equipment. So it's all the initiatives that we do offer, that we have been offering. There's nothing really new in that category.
Thank you. Leslie?
Just as a follow-up, I looked at the application from last year and how you use the funds, and it's typically in a similar way, with the one exception that this year, with $24,000 going to the administrative staff assistant for the lab department, are there new administrative needs in that department? Your staffing level was the same for year to year. This looks like it's more than just, this is not, I don't know if this is heavy part-time or a full-time
Well, we have a
position, but-
permanent part-timer that has been shared with both the lab and environmental health because they're one unit. You know, environmental services is broken down to environmental health and the laboratory. We see that the environmental health program, there's a lot more need for the program that we're doing upstairs, you know, a lot more permitting. So the person that usually is downstairs, what she does is that she puts a couple of hours, because it's only 25 hours a week. What she does is go downstairs and upstairs, and then the upstairs only has another full-time person, but it's not enough. So we're going to try this out on state money to see whether or not, you know, environmental health will get more, you know, more assistance by keeping the 25-hour person that they share upstairs more, and with a few hours of the, you know, administrative assistant downstairs. We're going to see if that helps. If it doesn't, then I'll probably turn that around, because this is all these positions are not union represented, so there's no, you know, problem in me not funding this, you know, another time. It's less than 15 hours a week. It's always a problem if it's more, but, yeah.
I know you raised an issue I hadn't thought about, but it sounds to me like you would maybe starting to encroach on a problem for the way that you're using these funds, but you
No, I think
indicated-
environmental health really needs, back in the day, we used to have one full-time environmental assistant and one full-time 25-hour person exclusively for environmental health, and nothing for the lab. And as we start to get, and then I lost that full-time person, permanent part-time, and then we got one between us. So, and then that's, right now, it's not really working that well because environmental health gives out, and we'll do 1,800 permits a year. You know, there's a lot of permitting up there. And it's just a lot of paperwork for one, you know, one person, and the half a person that they share, they don't spend enough time to really help out upstairs. So I'm going to try out, see whether or not we're going to be able to do this.
Okay, thanks.
Nisha?
A quick question. I think I might have asked you this last year, Caroline. Is this a recurring grant? So if the grant goes away, are you, I mean, are we counting on this grant every year to be able to provide these services?
This grant will not go away. This is a constant grant that we get from the federal government through the states. United States, all states get this federal grant. The amount of money changes over the years.
And
It's
do
been
you have to apply for it?
60,000, it's been 75,000, it's 100, and this year and last year it's about 122, which is probably the biggest amount of money, the most amount of money I've seen in a public health grant. But there's no way of saying, you know, for sure you're going to get 122, but
You just adjust.
it will always come to the state. It's just a matter of how much.
Right, you just
And it'll
adjust.
always come to full-time health departments.
You
not the
just-
part-time health
You just adjust the items based upon the grant
Oh, yeah.
number, right? That's good.
Thank you. So do I have a motion to approve? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Caroline, for the people that are, I'm over here, sorry. For the people that may be watching, could you just explain the grant process and where the money is coming from, under what auspices, and how it works from year to year?
So when Washington starts to look at their budget, there are certain funding that comes to every state in the amount of public aid. And this is a public act grant that comes to the states from the federal government or from Washington. And it comes in a big lump sum, and the way that Connecticut deals with it is that only the full-time health departments, whether they be town full-time health directors and/or municipalities, get this grant. There are no part-timers get this particular grant. And so it all depends on how much comes in every year from Washington. And of course, the state takes their part of the grant, and then it gives divvies up among the towns and cities that have full-time health directors, and it's all appropriated by population. And so that's how you get the amount of money that you do.
Thank you for the additional information, Caroline. So do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve to use the $122,582 Public Act Funds grant for the Health Department.
Now second.
And so a motion made by Leslie Moriarty and seconded by Nisha Rohr. Is that
I would say
Routine?
routine. I would say
routine?
routine.
Those in favor of the motion? That motion is passed 4-0-0 unanimously. So thank you very much, Caroline Baisley, our health director and team. Thank you, Matt, too, and others. So our next application is from Nathaniel Witherall. It's for an additional appropriation for tray lines for $110,000. So we have the Nathaniel Witherall team. So we see some new people that we have not seen at our meetings before with Nathaniel Witherall. So perhaps you'd like to make some introductions.
Certainly. So we have our Director of Financial Operations, Joan Lynch, and we have our Director of Facilities, Stefano Materia, and you know me.
Right. So, would you like to present your request, please?
Yes.
Or whoever you would like
Yes,
to.
certainly. So thanks for seeing us today. And as you stated, we are requesting an interim appropriation for $110,000 for tray line service. Excuse me, I'd just like to give the committee a bit of background. As you know, outsourced dietary labor costs have been reduced significantly since February 2023, and the next step in reducing costs in dietary is moving to a tray line service. So I asked our Director of Financial Operations to put together a brief analysis, and that is what I'm currently referring to. The tray line service would result in 1.5 to 2 fewer staff needed per shift. And these food service workers are currently provided by an agency called Chief of Staff, which is contracted by METS, our food service vendor. And they are expensive outsourced labor. In addition, the new tray line system would save food and supply costs. So the estimated cost of the new tray line system, as I said, is $110,000. Once we go to the single tray line system, we would immediately cut 1.5 to 2 food service workers per shift, which are currently outsourced, and that would save us approximately $6,000 per week. And even after considering food and supply savings, we would cover this investment in 4 months. Food and supply savings would result from plating the food in one place, because currently what's happening is the food is brought up to the floors and plated in the pantries, and it gets cold rather fast. Thereby, we wouldn't be wasting unused food, and we wouldn't be plating at other stations. It would save us in serving supplies, containers, et cetera. Only needed in one place rather than split amongst all of the other plating stations. And in addition, METS has told us that they believe the quality of the food would improve as well, because the hot food would still remain hot and the cold food would be cold. And that's not happening now. And METS also has told us that in our discussions with them, most other nursing homes have made this transition back to centralized, single tray line service to good effect.
Thank you. Do we have any questions about it? Laura?
Can you just talk about the prior, the kitchen code compliance project, and that you'll be returning funds? That will be a closeout?
Yes, you want to?
Sure. So originally, we had a code compliance issue, or at least we suspected there was a code compliance issue, and we requested funds of $300,000 in order to satisfy the work that needed to be done to become code compliant. Upon further research, we went out and sourced another company to give us a second opinion on the cost of the work and everything else to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And we found out that there was a far less expensive solution, which we confirmed with the fire marshal for the town of Greenwich, and agreed that that was the proper solution to go with. And we brought that cost down to just over, or just under $25,000. And so there's a substantial savings or funds that are not going to be used, or not needed for that compliance issue. Thus, led us to request this other appropriation of funds for the tray line system.
Did you have a follow-on or a different
Yeah,
question?
I just wanted to follow up, because I just wanted to, I attended the last board meeting where this was discussed and voted upon in favor. And one of the continuing issues that has been brought up by Family Council is the temperature of the food. And this was felt to be a solution to that problem, as well as a savings. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. It's a food quality issue that has been raised multiple board meetings that I've attended.
So one other thing that I would like to bring up before I ask further questions, or others ask any further questions, is the fund balance here. It says it comes from fund balance, and that's Nathaniel Witherall's fund balance. It's not the general fund balance, as I understand it. So it's maybe a little negative, but it's Witherall, and we should probably note that on our blue sheet for the full BET meeting. Roland? So it's correct, right? So are there any other questions? Leslie? Or?
No, I thought the documentation explained it. It's a very quick financial return, it's an improvement in quality, and you found a cheaper solution for a prior project in the same area. So it sounds like all three components say this is the right thing to do.
Nisha? You have something?
Can I just ask, I'm trying to visually understand this, and I guess I'm having a little trouble. You're going to have, how does this work? I know you have different, floors have different cafeterias. So where's the food prepared, and how does it get up there, and why is it hotter than it is now or colder than it is now? I'm trying to visually understand the process.
Sure. So currently, we either have, on the short-term units, we have kitchenettes, and on the long-term units, we have pantries, ostensibly the same thing. But the food is taken in small carts that are not temperature controlled. And so they're losing heat and/or chill as soon as they're put in those carts. The carts they don't protect anything. They go up to each one of the kitchenettes or pantries, and then they're subsequently plated up there, also losing temperature, and they're put on other carts, brought out to the floors, and then if the CNAs who are supposed to be bringing those and serving our residents, depending on what's going on with them, that there may also be some lag time. So you can see where you've got at least 3 places in which you're losing temperature, and you wouldn't really want to, as Laura said, it's not very appetizing, hot food not being hot, cold food not being cold. This would take place, the single tray line would take place where everything was prepared in the kitchen. It would be prepped and then put in hot carts and cold carts. They're separate sections, so hot food in the hot section, cold food in the cold section. And then they'd be brought up directly to the floors and served directly from those carts.
Okay, so the carts are basically warming carts or cold carts, depending on the type of food.
Exactly.
So that it wouldn't lose the heat going up. Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah,
Because I didn't
exactly.
understand how you would get them up there. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So, any more questions? So this is just a reversal of a trend. There was a trend to have these like mini kitchens on every floor, and then the food would be taken up and heated in that kitchen, but that isn't happening. So now it's a return to what was done before without the major investment in all the mini kitchens.
Exactly right.
Okay, so, any further questions, or are there any motions, or is this something that we want to
Nope.
do?
I'll make a motion to approve $110,000 additional appropriation for the tray line project in Nathaniel Witherell.
And I'll second.
So motion made by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Nisha Arora. Is this routine or non-routine, as you see this?
I think the documentation is pretty clear. I'd say routine.
Laura, are you comfortable with that? Okay. So we'll take this motion and vote it as a routine item. So those in favor? That motion passes 400 as routine. So you can speak with our chairman and find out whether you need to come on Tuesday is our meeting rather than Monday after the holiday weekend. But I don't know whether routine is fine? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so if you just coordinate with our chair, that would be super.
Thank you.
Thank you
for your
very
time.
much.
Appreciate it.
So our next item is actually, it totals 3 items, and it's from our Public Works Department. So we have with us today Jim Michael from the Public Works Department, and we also have Laura Bagici from the Law Department, and we have
Michael Kislak.
Michael Kislak from the DPW.
Public Works, yes.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with a description of the project. I should add that we had a first read with this last month. There were questions raised. We did not take it to a vote. So since we have had this meeting, it's also gone to the Law Committee, and so we'll hear from that later. And so if you can just update us on what might have happened since, you don't have to go back to the beginning, but what might have happened since last month when you attended the meeting.
Okay, so last month, when we attended the meeting, we were asked to work with Stanford to get some sort of agreement put in place for sharing the cost of this. We've had a number of back and forth conversations with them, with various members through the Law Committee as well of the BET, and we've made modifications. We had sent them a agreement prior to even the last meeting. We sent a copy of that agreement to the BET Law Committee after the meeting that day, same day. We received some comments back around the end of October. We made a few more changes. Basically, at this point in time, we have an agreement with Stanford in concept that many of the red line changes that we've proposed, that they've proposed, are all acceptable. So Laura, my understanding is when she stepped out of the room a few minutes ago, that was the counsel from Stanford calling her saying, yes, it's acceptable, so, in concept, so.
So again, this is for a multi-use path from Greenwich to Stamford, and it starts at the Binney Park, and it's 8 to 10 feet wide, that's what I remember from last month, and it goes to, it starts with the B, B-U.
Bacuzzi, I believe.
Bacuzzi Park and Stamford. And so I think we talked the last time in terms of the amount of the grant, which is in total $338,000. And we said that Stamford has 27% responsibility here, and the town of Greenwich, 73%, as I remember. It's still the same ratios. So,
And
Laura, do you want anything more to say about this agreement and your discussion in the law department?
Yes, well, Jim, if you want to.
I was gonna say, the one other thing I would like to say is, I know that there has been some hangup about what happens with Stanford's portion if we do not get reimbursed or reimbursed in a timely manner. So we've worked in a clause within the agreement that says if we don't get reimbursement within, I can't remember if it's 4 months or 6 months, then Stanford will pay to the town their portion of that amount, and then the town will then reimburse them once that reimbursement comes in. So, and I did talk with my business, the accounting group in DPW. They said that the average reimbursement timeframe that we've been seeing on current projects is about 4 to 6 months. So that's what we're seeing. So that's where we're trying to make sure that we're being reasonable with Stanford, but not overly.
I just asking, I think I asked a question before on this. I asked if there's a holdback on this. I mean, I know in many of the grants, they might reimburse like 90% or something, and then they hold it back until the project is completed. Is there anything like that on this one? The state?
We've not seen anything listed in the agreements or, and typically we do not see that on our grant programs.
Okay, thank you. Leslie?
I just wanted to back up a second because there's been some conversations over the past few weeks among, I think it was at the Law Committee, and other conversations to identify really what this cash flow issue is. And so there were two concerns about the MOU. One is the cash flow. So while we're getting a state reimbursement, a state 80% cover of the cost, it's reimbursement, so that Greenwich, which is signing the agreement with the state, is out of pocket for 100% of the cost until we get the reimbursement from the state. And because we're sharing this with.
Can I just stop? I think it's 100% of the 80%.
Yeah, we're paying the full freight of this contract with an outside designer until we get the state's reimbursement for their 80% of the grant, correct? So there was some concern about, well, Greenwich is taking the risk. One, we're time cost of money, we're putting the money out front, we're not getting the state's reimbursement for 4 to 6 months, and Stanford isn't paying any portion of the 80% of the state's portion, right? Stanford is giving us their portion of the town's obligation here, right when you pay the invoice. So when the invoice comes in, Greenwich pays 100%, and Stanford will give you, Stanford give you their 27%, 21%, then, or they're paying their 20%
I'm pretty sure we're still
upfront?
at the point where Stanford has agreed to give us their 20%
Upfront.
upfront at the beginning. So
Right.
they're kind of setting their entire, about $18,000 they're giving us upfront
Right.
for
So
this project.
The concern is that we're carrying the 80% of the state for that 4 to 6 months. And is there is there a risk for not getting the full reimbursement? And then would Stanford pay us that amount? And secondly, just that we're covering the out-of-pocket expense there. But, and so what you've negotiated is that Stanford agrees to come in to pay that state portion if we haven't received the reimbursement within 4 or 6 months. So we wouldn't carry that indefinitely, which addresses some of the concern. It's not 100% of the concern, but given the size of the design money and their obligation, to me, that's a good compromise. That was the first issue that I think was under discussion.
Oh, and one other quick thing, and we did try to make it very clear that this is not going to be a precedent for the potential construction funding, that grant would not, that it's not just a matter of we would extend this agreement. We would have a different agreement because we do understand there's a larger amount of funding being discussed here.
I just wanted to give that background so we were clear on what the issue was and what the solution was.
Right, what the proposal is at this time. So I think Dan, usually I would come here first, or maybe, I'm going to go to Nish, or which,
Well, my question is just very specific to what Leslie was talking about. So I think the fact that, let's just say it's $100,000, town shares 20, so we're going to effectively pay 15 ourselves and get 5 from Stanford approximately. But my question is time value money, you mentioned, Leslie, the 80,000. So if it's 6 months at 5%, that's 2%. So effectively, time value money, we're out $1,600 on that 80%. Is Stanford going to pay 400 of that, and we pay the other 1,200? Because that's, right now, I think that's how, is that how it's being proposed?
right, I mean, this is what.
That's not
this
the
is-
agreement.
This is not, what you're talking about is not in the agreement. And in fact, while we talked about some of these other issues at our last meeting, and that Stanford would only be doing this, it really doesn't, we haven't had any further update from Stanford that they're willing to consider, pari passu or some other things. And what Leslie was talking about also, I think, was addressed by her colleague, or Karen's colleague in the law department, about a fairness issue with the town fronting for that. I think your point is very valid, Dan, and I'm also going to speak, see if Nisha, you said you had questions.
I did.
Brought a good point, Dan.
I did.
so my concerns were not around the Stanford cash piece, especially on the grant. I don't see this as a material issue of time value of money of a few $1,000s. So my concerns from last meeting, which I don't know if we can get more color on, was really around, I think this is a great project. It looks like something we should all get behind. It wasn't about the initial 300,000 or so grant, of which 70, the 20, 50,000. Putting all of that aside, it was if this project were to move forward, it would be another 3 to 4 million. And, I know those numbers were kind of rough, but, whatever that dollar number would be. So I was just trying to understand, and I was just thinking about this coming into the meeting, what was the process in applying for this grant in terms of where did the need come from? Was it a specific, I know that we have a bike task force in town. Were they the ones that kind of drove it? And if I could just finish that train of thought, one sec, really just trying to understand, making sure we're filling a need that's actually being requested by the community. I know we're probably going to have concerns later, or issues that might come up, this is my house, do I want this sidewalk? But that'll be addressed in a public hearing setting. But before we even go down the path of, wanting to move forward with this project, just trying to understand who's driving the need of this project. Is it the whole community? Is it a very specific 20-person group? Just if you could give us,
Yeah, so there is, a combination of things. Number one, what used to be the Bike Task Force is now the Active Transportation Task Force. It is a group that was working with and was asked to work between the First Selectman's office and the mayor's office of Stamford, work together with the group that's similar in nature from Stamford to determine, is there a location where we could work together to create a unified project that would connect the two facilities for alternative transportation methods. So whether that means bicycles, that means people walking, for ways for people to get to school, get to, different community centers, stuff like that. So that was where it started from, and that's kind of the driving force behind it.
So is it, just to be clear, is it connecting, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, I'm just thinking, is it more transportation from point A to point B, or is it recreation? Is there actually people that are going to use it for?
There may be people that use it for recreational use. There may be students that live in Old Greenwich that would take it to get to Old Greenwich School, because our current pathway would follow Shore Road and then up Sound Beach, go right down by the school, go through downtown, and then to Binney. So it would connect to downtown Old Greenwich.
It would.
It would be close to the Greenwich train station, Old Greenwich train station. And so there is an opportunity for people to utilize it in that manner.
And do you, just on that same, that sounds great. In terms of the number of people that are in this, can you just give me some color as to, is it a 5-member task force, 10-member task force, and how many, again, I'm just trying to understand, is the Old Greenwich community requesting this, or is it coming from this group of 10 people? Like, do we know this is, it sounds like a great idea. Just want to make sure this is something the community actually wants.
There's been a decent amount. We did go to the Board of Selectmen meeting for a couple of hearings before we even put the grant application in. So it was heard there, and we did receive a few comments back of positive reinforcement of that. I'm not exactly sure the number of people on the Active Transportation Task Force, but.
It's not like 50 people, right? It's just a
It's
small
not
task
1,000
force.
people,
Right,
but it's
right.
not 2, so.
I can't think of, the only concerns, if I were an Old Greenwich resident, I would think about, especially if it's being used as a transportation, which sounds like a great idea as well. Does it increase traffic? Does it increase, is there any safety concerns? And I don't know, maybe
Right.
this will come up later
Right.
on.
Those
They
are all
said
things
those
that
are
we
all
would
things
like to
you-
explore, and
right,
that's,
right.
we understand that sidewalks do create some
Mm-hmm.
discussions, for sure, in this town, and so we just want to make sure as part of the project, that's what we would be. That's part of what this funding is for, is to do the conceptual feasibility study of finding out where it would go, then go out to the public hearings process to get those.
Your instinct is that this would be a value add to the community.
Correct, yes.
So, I'll add my comments here, which I think I raised the last time, but, this, I think it's great that you have a grant and that grant is available to us. You know, we keep hearing about the timing pressures of the grant. If we don't move ahead, we could lose the grant, et cetera. But, you know, also, this is an out-of-cycle project, and so it's coming in, while Nisha's asked these questions, it's coming in off-cycle. So normally, a project would be considered with the entire budget process. With many other projects, as you know, you generally include your capital projects in the budget that's put together by the first selectman. And there's opportunities for 2 public hearings by the public during this process. First, the budget, hearing from the fiscal year, in this case, it would be fiscal year 25 budget, or later on from a public hearing of the BET budget. And they would see this, everyone would understand the balance of this and, the workload, say, for the department. And, in this case, it seems to be the Public Works Department. I did speak to Roland prior to this meeting a few days ago to see if, the superintendent could attend this meeting, and also our executive director for the Parks and Rec Department, since it's more recreational, but, they haven't, they're not in attendance. But I do think that while later on they'll be hearing, this is a proposal, as you presented to us, to put 8 to 10 feet of a special, bike path in an area that I think included a parking lot at Binney Park and et cetera into the Stanford. So from my standpoint, there are really several different things here. It's out of cycle, and, will the Public Works Department be, reducing its other projects accordingly in order to be able to handle this workload? And, I think that while it's, we're understanding the issue in terms of getting a grant and then having the timing, it also sets a precedent of moving major projects ahead of others, which when you do the priority, it may be good or may not be good. Neighbors may like it or they may not like it. My guess is that most of the people who went to the Board of Selectmen's meeting, the neighbors probably weren't aware of it, and it was probably more the advocates for the project. But I think more importantly here, we're being asked to do something. I would have expected, more input on whether this could be pari passu, in terms of funding it rather than just the 20%. But I would also like to understand the status, because this is not a signed agreement. We also hear about other sections that I don't think we see in this package. So, Ms. Vassilotis, do you want to give us an update of what happened in the Law Committee meeting?
Would love to. We did have a discussion. There was a discussion of the payment of, and the fairness issue that you mentioned, and that the fact that Stanford is not paying anything up front, we would be fronting the costs. There were 2 options, that either they fund their amount fully, or we come up with a scheme where we would bill them for whatever it is. And I think that that's kind of reflected in the, I don't know if you saw the email that Attorney McGeechee circulated, but that type of language is now included where we would bill them basically for their pro rata share if we didn't receive reimbursement.
But that's
But we would still
at a
be-
later date, right? 4 to 6
Right,
months
we
later.
would still be fronting the amount of money, the full amount of the money. And then if we did not receive reimbursement in a timely manner from the state, we would bill them out. And then when we got the reimbursement, we would then reimburse them. So it's kind of an ebb and flow of cash flow there. But again, we would be fronting the money up front. We did not take a vote on it. We asked them to go back and explore. So we did not take a final vote on the memorandum of understanding because we didn't have the version that you have before you today.
So can I take one more step forward and while, you're still talking here? There's also a resolution. Our third item with this is the first is obviously the request, and it says additional appropriation, but it really just means appropriation, right? And in addition to the indemnification, what's called the indemnification, there's a resolution to accept the grant from DEEP. Was that something
don't-
approved by the law department? I mean, the law committee?
We never got that far because we didn't get through the memorandum of understanding, so.
And just to add to that, I had raised the issue, I wasn't sure we even needed
Right.
that motion.
And I'm sorry, that's where I thought we left it after the last meeting, because I know, based on conversations, I drafted that resolution, and again, in light of there are certain standing resolutions and budget process, but my takeaway, and in further consultation with the law department, that for an interim budget appropriation, that a resolution isn't needed. So I did see it on the agenda, but I did not think that that remained necessary. And so, again, whether that's withdrawn, and so it was not raised with the law committee either, based on the first read and the appearance before this committee last time.
And then, Laura?
I wanted to go back to the 338 appropriations. If you want to continue with your question about the resolution, go ahead, and you can come back to me.
So, I would look to Ms. Fasciolotis and the law committee to make these decisions. I don't think this is a budget committee decision. But
If I may, just capsulate where we are from law committee and with City of Stamford and what's before you now, that we've gone back from law committee comments and this committee's board's comments last time to incorporate concerns raised by the town. And so if I can just capsulate what's changed since we met with law committee, just so that that's before you. First of all, there was a C would run concurrently, and they do. I confirmed with the head of the of this grant project that it obviously runs concurrently. And so I thought it was important to just include and be clear that the meetings are going to be in both jurisdictions. This is a inter-municipal agreement to get public comment and feedback on the design process as well. So that is on the first page. The second page is the red line on the operations of the funding. Of course, we did do the ask, will you fund the full 27%, park it in Greenwich as we go? And the answer, if they're not in privity and contract, they don't control the reimbursement, they don't contract with the contractors, they're willing to pay, obviously, their share, but and they will, if for any reason, get delayed on reimbursement.
Morning, everybody, and welcome to the October 26th, 2023 Board of Selectmen.
38,000 from this board to be then put over to the DPW budget as an interim, that it will be paid out incrementally on a monthly basis. So the outlay will not be significant. Most of the town money will remain in town. And so that was the concern on holding anyway, that it would die on the vine, basically, with Stanford funding when they aren't even a participant. It's kind of they are a seat at the table, but they are not the grant full recipient. Nor do they control the contracting with the town. So that being said, we thought the best workaround was, because I know there was some concern, and again, I don't have the historical memory that there are some delayed reimbursements from the state to the town. And so hopefully that's been addressed and that it would be incremental amounts, but it will be obviously the extra step, but in order to protect the town from having to outlay, I don't think it will be significant amounts according to Jim Michael, that it might be 15,000 or a month, along those lines that we're talking about. So in any event, I believe that this hopefully, appeases the town, that the town will not be out of pocket. I've confirmed with the grant director up at DEEP that this money is fully allocated to the town, because there was also a question, can they nitpick invoices, et cetera, for the planning and design, and it's fully scoped. Most importantly, I wanted to talk about the indemnification, which is also my piece on the second item there, that there's indemnification to the state, DEP, in this grant contract. We've also, based on concerns raised at the law committee, that, well, what about, and others, about Stanford indemnifying us. It's very difficult to ask another entity to indemnify us, except for our direct contractors that want our work, but to ask another municipality to, without mutual indemnification provisions. This took an incredible amount of effort to have this one-sided. Because there's been extreme pushback. It's like, well, if you're asking for indemnification on the Stanford piece, we want indemnification on the Greenwich piece. But be it as it may, I think I've prevailed in that accord because, indicating the charter and your board's authority, et cetera, that we could not provide indemnity to the city of Stanford at this time and pursuant to this design and planning. And I think that they conceded due to the fact that the risk on indemnity for design and planning was essentially surveyors and engineers and drawing programs. So then getting to the next concept on the construction phase, that there would not be one primary, I think the concept would be both municipalities would apply for separate grants or do it in phasing, be it as you may, because of these, when it comes to construction, if that comes to pass, that wouldn't be tenable as an intermunicipal agreement with one person taking the lead. So that being said, I think that for the purposes of design and planning, and that this is a binding agreement, and that I've heard from Corporation Counsel that it is in legal order, that can push it on to the mayor for signature. But again, the fact that I did explain, they said, do you have approvals, et cetera? I said, well, this is one, obviously the acquisition before your board, but it would also have to go to RTM. And also based on some experience with legislative and rules, there could be potential tweaks. So I have a commitment that they will sign this with all the additional provisions that we added to hopefully, to further protect the town and appease everyone along the lines that it will be, I can confirm that based on my call that it will be signed, but again, do not want to go through the machinations of having the mayor Simmons sign and the first selectman sign, provided that there could be further tweaks. So I just wanted to report on where we were with that, and I apologize, it's last minute. It's also very difficult between municipalities to communicate and get definitive answers. So I pushed and we're here, and that's my report.
But you've also reminded me, there was also another item that perhaps we should have had here, and that's the approval of the indemnification. So I'm going to come back again to the chair of the law committee, and did you approve in the law committee the indemnification agreement? I mean, not, did the law committee approve the indemnification agreement? And that, I believe, is with
We've
the
had multiple
state.
meetings on this. I don't recall if we did it in the first meeting or not. I know we discussed it, but I can't for sure. I honestly don't recall. I don't believe we took an official vote on it. I think that we recognize that it's going to be needed, that, we don't really have an opportunity to negotiate with it, and we've done this in the past. So I don't see that it'll be an issue as far as the law committee is concerned. I don't recall if we took and I don't have the minutes before me, so I can't.
And, again.
Can I just say something too?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Attorney Mikichi for all of the back and forth that she's had with the corporate counsel in Stamford. I know how difficult it is to do these deals, having done corporate deals when I was in private practice. in the city. So I really appreciate her listening to our concerns and trying to accommodate the best that she could, knowing the constraints with corporate counsel. So I just wanted to reflect that, too.
So now that these changes have occurred, and there were certainly the questions in the law committee that were raised by the committee members, is there a plan to have another law committee meeting on these documents? I mean, what is the plan here?
I didn't anticipate a special meeting. I certainly could have one before our regular meeting. I personally think that the comments that we had are addressed with the additions. I think that, that's the best we can do, given the constraints of intermunicipality agreements. We do have at least something in writing saying that we would be reimbursed if we weren't reimbursed. It's a $338,000 grant. If it was $338 million, I might have a different opinion. So I think our risk in this is low. I know that, Steve expressed fairness issues, but I don't think that without being a party to this, anybody would agree to front money when they're not a party to an agreement. So I think that this is the best we can do. But certainly I can have, I'll talk to Steve if we need an additional meeting. I don't know if we definitely need one, because we will be considering this at the full BET, and we can certainly express our own individual opinions then.
We don't normally approve legal agreements, with this much changes but
We certainly can. Personally, I think that the concerns have been addressed as best they can be, and I'm not going to speak for Steve, but, I certainly can have a meeting before our BET meeting.
Jeff?
A couple of quick things.
I didn't see it. Yeah.
A couple of quick things, if I can. One, I would hope that the committee would ask for this to be non-routine, so we could have a dialogue at the full BET. Secondly, if the participation agreement with Stamford is not formally approved by the time we're meeting next Tuesday, or whenever it is that we're going to be acting on this, I myself, maybe others, would be inclined to want to condition the release of the funds on there being formal approval from the state. A couple of questions through the chair, if I can, for Mr. Michael. One, is there a general understanding at this point with the state that once the plans are developed, that there is grant funding, perhaps in approximately 80% of the project cost on the construction too, or do we not have that understanding with the state? The roughly $4 million of the construction funding, which is suggested in the materials we have before us.
So this is a program that they offer on an annual application basis. So, and they've been running it for a number of years. There's a possibility that those, we would be competitive against all the other projects within the state for those fundings. In addition, there are other programs within the state's transportation network that this grant may this project would potentially qualify for, and therefore we would think that we could get hopefully at least 80% of the funding back at a later time. I don't think we would look to pursue this project for construction until such time as we get some sort of assurance of grant funding for the project.
Okay. So the idea is that we would be committing, assuming we have the reimbursement from the state, the reimbursement from the state and the reimbursement from Stamford, we'd be spending approximately $50,000 to do the design work to get to a point where we could begin to get some of these approvals on one grant funding or another. That's sort of the idea, isn't it? Yeah? Yes?
Pretty much, yes.
Is there any conversation, I don't mean to complicate an already complicated conversation with our sister municipality, but is there any expectation that Stamford would participate with us in similar percentages on the construction funding if we were able to get that far? Pardon?
If we were to move this project forward to construction, it would probably be two separate projects, one that goes from Stamford line through Greenwich, and one in Stamford separately. So
Okay.
we may have conversations with Stanford at that time about both applying for our own individual grants, and in talking with DEP, they would probably look to approve both of them or none of them, if that were the case, if that was the path we took, or we might look at one of the other programs that could be utilized through the Department of Transportation.
The not quite $4 million worth of construction expense, which is estimated roughly in the materials we have, that's the cost of the whole project, including the Stanford piece.
Correct.
Thank you. I have nothing else, Madam Chairman, thank you.
So I apologize. Laura had a question, and I called on Jeff first. So I
Sorry.
apologize. Laura?
It wasn't really a question, it was more going back to the substance of the 338 appropriation and the, how it came about and the advocacy. And we did receive an email from a member of the Active Transportation Task Force, but I just looked it up. There was a press release in the spring. It was attended by Mayor Caroline Simmons, our first selectman, the governor, numerous representatives from both state delegations on Stamford and Greenwich side, a member of the Greenwich Land Trust. So I think this is one of those mutual, there's an opportunity here with a grant program, let's give it a try. This is the design process. And I appreciate the point about we want to be sure that neighbors on both sides of the border are informed and included, but I think that, I'm less concerned about it being an off-cycle grant because I think that will come later when we actually have a design to discuss and have, a more substantive hearing. So I think, it's appropriate for us, I echo what Ms. Vasiliotis said, a lot of work has been done between the first law committee, the first read of this, and where we are today. I think it's tremendous progress, and I am comfortable on moving this forward as a non-routine item for Tuesday.
Okay. Leslie?
Before I make the motion, I just wanted to confirm the timing. I think previously you had said Stanford would not sign this agreement until we've actually gotten confirmation from the state for the grant. So there may be a timing gap. Is that not the case?
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that they will sign this immediately upon us indicating that this has been approved internally.
By the RTM?
Yes.
After the RTM
Yes.
appropriation? Okay.
And that they can, and this is approved internally, and we sign this, they will immediately pay over their share of the 20%.
Okay.
Unreimbursed.
Can that be documented in here or just,
Can I-
get signed and then not effective until?
Can I just make it as, I think we should just condition it upon, and make a condition.
Yeah, upon their signature. So
Yeah.
it can go through the RTM with the condition.
Right.
Then when they sign it, the condition automatically just
Dissolves.
disappears.
Condition upon the signature, I think it should be, the signature should occur first, but the document doesn't become effective until it's fully through the RTM in the town process. I would do it differently.
Effectively, that's the same thing. I don't want to.
No, the reason why I wouldn't do it that way is because the RTM, I don't know if you've attended legislative and rules lately, but the RTM legislative and rules basically may, try to come up with some amendments, so you won't have a final letter until it gets through the RTM. So I don't think you can have them sign it. I think it needs to be conditioned upon, the approval of the RTM, and then, or we'll talk about what the condition can be for the full BET to look at. But I don't think you can have a signed letter before it goes to the to the RTM. I just don't think that that's going to work.
Right. Can I make a motion to approve PW2 for 300?
Actually, let me just move this over here so I write it down, because I think we're going to need to, I don't know which one it is. Okay, to approve?
To approve PW2 for an additional appropriation of $338,000 for the multi-use path grant to make that non-routine, and to recommend that the full BET consider a condition upon Stanford's signature for a completed an executed interim municipal agreement with Stanford.
And is there a timing, like, prior to the town signing the agreement for the DEEP? The DEEP grant, so that we know that they're going to have their money there?
I mean, I guess that would be the preferred timing, so I
Okay.
don't see that being holding up the project.
I'm sorry?
I don't want to hold up the grant, which is, we know that the state had requested us to make the formal application in September. So
Right.
right now, we're looking at a December RTM.
Right.
If
Our
they
hope,
need-
our hope would be we get approval at the December RTM.
And you
We
can
get
apply the
Stanford to
next
sign it within a week. We sign the grant with the state within the week after we got that thing, so that it's all under, all the agreements have been signed
Right.
at that point.
So.
If I may, I'll just clarify on this revision. It says that the town of Greenwich notifies the city of Stamford the town has received approvals to appropriate the 338 planning and design costs for the project and is authorized to execute the grant award contract with Connecticut Deep attached to this. So that would be then RTM approval. So it would be, as soon as we notify there's approvals by the town, they will then execute and pay over their 18.2. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Did you understand that?
I understand the timing of signing the agreement, which is after the RTM vote, and we get the funding at that point. We may not have yet applied to the state, although you expect to have that concurrently, really. But the MOU doesn't really say, or does it say upon Greenwich's application to the state? I'm not sure that's the language currently.
There is no application to the state. They've already granted the grant award. They're just
Okay.
waiting for our execution.
Okay.
So once we have approval to execute, we just need to return it to Connecticut Deep.
Yeah, what I don't want to do, though, is to have them have to wait for our January, well, we meet a week after, but have them wait for the BET to release the condition. There may be changes by legislative and rules, and I'm looking at Karen, that may be a cause of concern.
Well, I mean, we may need to see it again depending on changes, if anything, so I don't really see that is going to be a
So
delay.
it may hold you up a week, because if it's a BET review and approval of the final interim executed.
I mean, we're approving a certain agreement. If it changes, I would assume that it would have to come back to us to make sure that we're okay with it. If it affects, I don't know. I mean,
I'm just looking at the calendar. It just so
I know.
happens in December, we meet after the RTM.
Yes,
So, oh no, we meet the same night.
yeah, so that wouldn't work.
So that would mean a special meeting.
We would know before,
Okay,
we would know before that.
legislative and rules.
Yeah, because they meet the previous Monday, so we would know.
I was gonna say, You'd
All
have
right,
the,
so
you'd have the
fine.
committee meeting reports the
Right,
week
so if we
before,
can
so.
act on the
Yeah, so we
committee
can
meeting
release the
report.
condition the night of, and then, just inform Alexis that, they're free to go.
The only piece you'd be missing is if the full body didn't accept legislative and rules
Yeah,
changes, but that's a small risk.
Yeah.
But, so I think the condition would be for BET review and approval of the final.
I'm sorry, what is it? So
It's for a condition upon BET review and approval of the final interim municipal agreement. We won't, at that point, that Monday meeting, we won't have Sanford's signature, though. But we have their verbal
But
agreement.
I think you have in the document that they're going to
It's
sign
upon
it. So,
RTM.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I that's not an issue, I don't think. I
Leslie,
mean,
just to be clear, you're conditioning it upon full BET approval?
Yes, full BET, but review and approval of the final interim municipal agreement. So the Budget Committee
Will not.
will not, well, in theory, we may have the benefit, Legislative and Rules meets on Monday nights, and our Budget Committee meeting is on
The 5th, I think.
Tuesday, so if,
Well, the other factors, we want to be sure that whatever changes legislative and rules might hypothetically make are acceptable to the city of Stamford. So we'd need also confirmation from our town attorney that those changes are acceptable.
I think so, Budget Committee may not be the ones to act on it, which I think is, will
Fine,
the law committee can act on it. They may meet the day later. I'm not sure when your meeting is, but I think we're okay. Actually, you meet the same day as well, the 5th. But I think we're overthinking this.
Well, I think we're overthinking it because normally it would have come out of the law committee and be approved, and these issues would have been addressed from the law committee. So I think that we're playing a role here that's trying to
Laura
move it
and Jim.
ahead without having our normal process.
Laura and Jim, I would just urge legislative rules not to mess with it too much.
We will do our best.
So Leslie, you made the
certainly.
motion. Was it seconded?
I'll second it. Yep.
So, motion by Leslie. Second by Nisha Arora to approve the $338,000 with a condition where the condition is that
BET
BET reviews
review and approval of final
the final municipal.
interim municipal agreement is the name.
Okay.
If I may, just on your wordsmithing, I don't know that it would be interim. It would be.
It's intermunicipal.
It's
Intermunicipal. Intermunicipal, I think,
Yeah.
that's what she's,
Okay.
We'll pick that little thing up. So I want to turn, before I take the vote here once again, to the Law Committee Chair. I don't plan to approve this at this point in time. I would like to have the Law Committee review this document and sign off on it. There's a lot of back and forth here. And, would you be willing to consider a special Law Committee meeting prior to?
I think I indicated that we could have one. I have to see what Steve's availability is, but my hope would be to have it on Tuesday before our meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll take a vote. So those in favor? So those in favor is 3. Those opposed, those abstaining, and I'm abstaining, waiting for the review by the Law Committee, which I think is our process. So that motion passes with the condition 301. And this is non-routine, correct?
All right, thank you. We'll see you on
Thank you very
Tuesday.
much.
Thank you.
So can I make a motion to go right to the indemnification, or I don't know if there's discussions.
I'm sorry, you're making a motion.
For SE3? The indemnification?
Okay,
So I'll make the motion to approve SE3 for the indemnification of the estimated $338,000 grant from DEEP, and I don't know if we need to say condition upon RTM approval, but because you wouldn't have the indemnification if there's no grant. So I don't know if we need a condition on that. I think the department would only, or our,
We'll only take it up.
they would only do it if they're getting the grant. So I would say no condition on that, and it would be non-routine since it's tied to the other non-routine item.
I'll second that, Leslie.
so moved by Leslie, seconded by Nisha. So may I just ask if the Law Committee, if it reviews previous minutes and finds that it hasn't approved this indemnification, and it has a special meeting, if it could add this to the agenda too, please?
Naturally, thank you, yes.
So those in favor? So this time I'll just, since you're unsure, so that is 400. And then we decided that it's not necessary, as I understand, is that the correct, to address the resolution? And it's not needed at this time.
I think we can withdraw the item, SE4.
Okay, so thank you very much, team. Appreciate it. So we now are moving on to the Board of Education. And so I see, I'm sorry? So I see Blaze Leviton, and I welcome him. Hello. I'm sorry? I think, yeah, people frequently say Dr. H rather than, but welcome, Stacy. Thank you very much. So our first request for appropriation is for a Board of Education, $2,528,982,000. It's a additional appropriation for the town special education program. So you have Dr. H. Stacy has included a very detailed memorandum with this request in terms of the requested appropriations. So I don't know if you'd like her to go through some of the highlights of this memo, or you've read it and not necessary, whichever you prefer. Would you like some highlights of the?
I think I like.
Okay, so Stacy, could you please give us some highlights from your memo? Just, I think the key items, there's, what, 5 of them? 6 of them. 6 of them total, and then just the critical points, please.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
perfect. So there's several points. The first one is looking at, we recently needed to hire additional special education teachers. Our numbers continue to go up and we're qualifying more students. And as we have more students, we need to have more teachers to be able to provide supports to them. We each year are netting an additional 60 to 70 students per year. So even if we account for the number of students who graduate with the number of students who we qualify, we are still netting an additional 60 to 70, which require additional staff to provide supports. The second point is the professional service with the attorneys. So even though it's a consolidated, the law department, it is a consolidated service, there is, for certain cases that are at the federal level, there's a shared expense between the Board of Ed and the law department because we need to contract out with a third-party law firm. The next, the professional services medical, cover our occupational and physical therapy services. We contract with Constellation Services, and as the number of students continues to increase, the needs increase, and so this addresses being able to provide the contractual services that are required in the IEPs for students. The next is the added district tuition. Just this last end of June, the state changed the requirement for the school districts in providing services to students who turned 22. Previously, it was when a student turned 22, on the day they were 22 in one day, those services transitioned to the state. The very end of June, they approved legislature that requires the school district to be responsible for those students until the end of the school year in which they turned 22. So those students weren't accounted in our initial budget proposal because we did not assume the responsibility for the entire school year. So that's approximately $950,000 just for those students with that change in the legislation. That also then increases the next bullet point about special education transportation. So with the students staying, we do have transportation needs that we need to continue to provide transportation. And then finally, the last has to do with benefits. We have approximately 23 staff that are on our IDEA grant, the grant we get from the state. The grant covers the salaries, and it also, the town of Greenwich looks for that to cover the benefits. However, the cost of employees has continued to go up, not in proportion with that of what the grant provides. So there's a few $100,000 difference between what we can cover with the benefits and what the need is, what the final cost is. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Laura?
So this is a very thorough presentation. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. First is any offsets. Is there any revenue from excess cost share or any other partners that are providing services to those students who turn 22? I think last time, or maybe I heard it in a Board of Ed meeting, I think some of those partners are Ableist or others that are providing services. Is there any offsets to these expenses?
So we are able to claim excess cost for those students. So we're following the same procedure that we've done before to try to continuously increase our excess cost. But some of our students where they are going to Ableist, we are paying, the school district is paying Ableist for those services. So unfortunately, we are mandated to cover the full cost of services of these students during this last year.
So can you give me a magnitude of this 2.6 million, 2.528? Is there an offset of a certain amount that you can say with confidence that covers this?
Yeah, there would be, so we brought in our excess cost grant, 1.8 million last year. So I would say that we would be encroaching up to 2 million. But until we like put everything through, but we had several fall birthdays, so we'll be able to claim most of years that we wouldn't have accounted for when we did the budget.
And they increased the formula too, right, slightly?
Slightly.
Can you say that again, Blaise? They increased the formula? Is that what you said?
There was also the legislature passed a slight increase in the reimbursement formula and excess cost as well. We're the lowest ranking town in the state of Connecticut in terms of reimbursement, but the formula also still did increase slightly for Greenwich as well for reimbursement on the excess cost.
So now I have to ask, because I thought the whole point was it's 4.5 or 3.5 times.
It's the amount, it's a percentage of the amount over 4.5 times, right?
Oh, and you're saying our percentage is low?
The percentages are assigned based on a ranking, a tiered ranking. So like between 78 and 90-something percent, we're at the 78% marker, but it's 78% of the amount over 4 times the cost per student.
So sorry, I have to ask, have you had a conversation with the state delegation about this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think this is something that we need to look at. This is a very serious financial repercussion and,
And many school districts, well, you could speak better than I can, but a lot of your colleagues are frustrated with the timing and cost burden that is drastically shifted based on legislation that was passed in June. Well, you could articulate the overall bill. That was a good bill, but it contained the significant cost expense, and it put this would be my own opinion, I guess, but it kind of put school districts in a tough spot because it had a lot of good legislation in it, but they passed it as a massive special ed bill. So it had a ton of good things in it, but it shifted the cost again, because this is the 3rd straight year of cost shifting.
Yes.
Connecticut was 21. 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. Then it went to 22, and now consecutively again, it's the year in which they turned 22. So that would be two years back to back of cost increases that are placed on the local school district before it goes to the state.
Are these, Leslie, just a quick question on like, are these students that are currently in the school system, like, why are they 21 and 22? Maybe I'm just a little, I don't have the background of some of my colleagues. Yeah.
Sure. So for some of our students with more significant disabilities, the school district is required to provide services until now through the school year of their 22nd birthday. So these are our students with more cognitive impairments. And so the adult services will not pick them up or provide any type of support until they age out of the school district program. So we have approximately, so we call this our Community Connections program. So we have approximately 15 students in that program, and then we have about 12 to 15 who are in out-of-district placements for that age group. So it's a very small population, but it's for our most significant needs
And
students.
these are, just to complete that thought, are these students that were in the school system like for many years? Or is it like, for example, a family moves into town, they have a 20-year-old and would require?
It could be
either
both. We only have a couple students who are move-ins out of that whole group. The majority do stay, but there are some that if a student did move in, we would be responsible for those costs.
And then I think you should, maybe you know the answer to this, but typically Medicaid would pick that up, right? Like for young adults that, after they turn 21 or 22, whenever they age out of your system, right? Because students, my understanding is Medicaid does cover young people that have disabilities.
So it's not so much Medicaid, it's the DDS, Department of Developmental Services. So for students who have an eligibility of an intellectual disability or autism, they provide the services through that department. Medicaid is more of an insurance where families can work with them for specific, maybe respite care or other services. But the main service comes from the state level department.
And then, Blaise, you mentioned it, that the age just kept kind of increasing from 21 to 22, and now 22 within 22.5, let's say, right on average. What's the kind of motivation behind that change? Are we just seeing that that we need to take care of students a little bit longer? Or, I understand why, if it's, the age is kind of an arbitrary number, but if we need to take care of them until 24, 20,
Yeah.
is that what you're observing in your field?
So the change from 21 to 22 was based on a legal case with the state of Connecticut in changing that. So it was an interpretation of the law. And many states all over the country have different interpretations. There is, I think it's like Michigan that's like till 26. So there are some states that cover services for a long time. So that particularly, I think, that's a legal interpretation. I think the shift through the school district, I think, is to really help the adult service providers. It's hard in the middle of a school year for students you're at school one day and then like the next day you're supposed to be in an adult service program. I think they're looking at really beefing up their transition services and supports. And I think this is part of looking at how they do that continuum of support of how do you move from school to what kind of programs are available and being able to start at a specific time instead of a rolling admission.
Just from the way you're describing it, this seems to me to be a program that's kind of, at least from a state perspective, just shifting the burden from the state to the town, to the municipalities, since it goes through. To me, this is less of a Board of Ed expense versus a social expense that our community needs to provide. It just happens to flow through the Board of Ed, which is fine. I'm just trying to just understand it's something we have to do, right? There's nothing really, no way around it. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah.
I'm sorry? Did you have a question?
I have other things, but not on that particular topic. Just, there are a few other questions I had about the explanations that were provided. Staying with out-of-district tuition, first of all, and looking at the explanation, you have all of the 1.15 attributed to really this out-of-district. I know that last year you came to us for an additional appropriation in the middle of the year for 1.1 million. Does that 1.15 fully cover the deficit that you have in special education out-of-district tuition? line item? I know when you come to us later in the year, it's sometimes an offset about what you think you've saved in other budget lines. So trying to fully understand what your budget deficit is in that line item. I don't know if you have that data today.
So we looked at, we know the exact cost for the students that are in the out-of-district programs that we need to fund for the additional age. We looked at any pending students. We also incorporated, I had a parent reached out who shared that they were possibly moving to Greenwich with a student who's in a residential placement, so we took that into account. It's the best account we can have with the information we have now, knowing that there's always going to be a couple students who might need an out-of-district placement. So, you know, we encapsulated that in the amount that we're looking at. It's the best magic ball that we have.
And I think, Leslie, if I know what your question is too, there is still the whole entire program. So we talk about we look at OOD and settlements kind of as one bucket basically. From ours, you don't, but we kind of do. But the overall program will still be in a deficit that will be picked up partially by the Board of Ed as SESS by the end of the year, I think. I think on the monthly financial report, we're not done with the analysis yet, but when we're done, I think it might be Friday actually, I'll share it with the board as well. I usually send them over. I think we'll have kind of a small projection on the deficit that'll still be picked up by the Board of Ed.
Is that just the deficit in just this out-of-district tuition settlements?
No,
or is it
SESS services, yeah.
All of the special ed services?
Yeah. We're here really talking about OOD because we have a really specific issue, but all SESS services will still have a slight deficit, I think, by the end of the year.
But what you're requesting today, the 2.5, is that's to address all of SESS, is it not, or is it?
Yes.
That's to get us most of it.
Most of it?
Yeah.
You're refining the analysis, the number may be a little different.
Yeah, these
but
are the
okay.
structural items that we know of that we're required to provide, that we're asking for an additional appropriation with. There's still going to be pieces that we will pick up out of, like last year, we got the interim. We still did pick up like another 600,000 off the operating budget all in SESS. But we were able to balance it out, and we did return about 1.1 million back at the end of the year. So this is kind of, we're doing this earlier. We have these required services with the hope of not freezing the budget to do what we did last year, and then can still, in theory, return the excess funds.
Yeah, no, it's definitely better for planning and better for providing all of the programming that you expected in your budget and not having to pull back, not knowing whether you can cover these funds or not. But just getting to understanding your budget assumption versus what reality is, going to the staffing first. In this explanation, it looks like you're hiring 3 teachers plus 1 psychologist, so 4 extra staff.
Correct.
And
2 already.
you separated between two, an explanation about 2, and then the other 2 separately, and I'm not sure what the difference is. They're all addressing the extra students, the higher number of students in your program.
2 are hired.
Yeah, two have already been hired.
Okay,
So
that's
we
the
had to
difference.
start the school year with hiring 2 additional staff due to the numbers. And the additional special ed teacher would be split between 2 schools. We've been watching those numbers, and they need another teacher or half a teacher at those schools to be able to support students, as well as a psychologist. We have a lot of needs for our students, and making sure that we support that. And thinking in terms of our psychologists, it's not just the counseling. All of the additional evaluations that are completed, the psychologists complete evaluations. So when we have an additional couple hundred students, we evaluate around 450, 500 students a year. And so as that keeps increasing each year, we need to offset some of that with the psychologist as well, because they're an important part of that evaluation procedure.
So this is a little precursor as we think about the budget too, but it's very difficult to understand the staffing component, right? Getting staffing information by labor contract doesn't really help understand your special ed needs versus where your other staff is. So I'm just putting in a plug that as we get to thinking about how to talk about your budgetary needs, I think getting us to have a better understanding of your staffing really would be helpful. I know in your financial report, you don't have the inclusion of the staffing report anymore. And, we see the number of certified staff at 913. FTEs was what was in your budget book, but it's not then further put into categories that we can, classroom teachers versus support staff versus special ed, whatever the proper categories are, I think would be helpful.
We can do that because we have that data, and I think a more global point in this leading up to when we have the same conversation, much more globally in February. What we're doing now on FTE too, because I think it's a fair point that we've had confusion or not enough clarity on FTE. So we have been trying to work across right now, Roland, myself, Tony, and then also Jonathan, coming up with making sure we all have the same exact definition of FTE. We're all speaking because the contract has different hours, like 7.2. So some people, you find out they're running an FTE analysis off 7.2 hours for elementary, 7.4. But we use a standard 35-hour measurement for FTE. We're straightening out, hopefully, all of these pieces for this FY25 budget conversation. So we'll have, in theory, a really good understanding of FTE and breakdown.
No, appreciate all that effort because I think it will be helpful, I think, if there's a common understanding of what it takes to run the district. And you had indicated too that you have a growth of 64 students. Was that planned? Was that expected when you were putting together a budget a year ago? And is that what you're thinking going forward, or?
I don't think we expected quite the growth that we had. We knew that we were going to increase. We have taken that into account in the budget. We are about 14.4% of our students with special education. If you look at the state, it's about 17%, and Fairfield County is about 18%. So our MTSS process is really working, and we're, qualifying the kids who need to be qualified, but I think that we will still see a bit of an increase if we look at the local and state trends around the eligibility of special education.
Okay, I'm going to move to a different category besides staffing. The OTPT extra services, that's related to the extra number of students. So that's clear in here.
Should we just send?
So on that, I was trying to see what the current contract was with Constellation. I didn't see it listed in the financial report because it seemed like 600,000 was a big leap. Can you just give us what is it currently versus?
1.13?
Yeah.
All in? 1.13 million?
Okay. 1.13 million? Would that normally?
1.13 million.
Wouldn't that normally be listed in the contracts over 100,000 in your financial report? I didn't see it.
It wasn't executed fully for this year.
Okay, all right,
Probably
gotcha.
by the time, there's only been one financial report, because the other financial report was ending June 30th.
Yeah,
So
well, I
this one
just looked at the
financial
October.
wasn't
Okay.
on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's in line with what
For
you had
September.
last year?
Yeah, it's slightly increased, about 150,000 more than last year.
Yes. So I just wonder, at what point, do you ever rebid those contracts? Are you sure this is the right number?
Yeah, I believe that this was bid just 2 to 3 years ago. And actually, Constellation is probably one of the bigger agencies within Connecticut. A lot of the agencies don't have the number of staff to be able to support a full school district, or they're from multi-state and they don't necessarily meet our requirements and can provide staff that can actually make it to Connecticut. So, yeah, and they can't do the insurance as well.
And so for clarity too, we have a 5-year contract that was bid. I think we're in year 3. So at the timing of that report, the supplement wasn't posted probably yet.
Okay.
But there's a contract. It just the new year's supplement wasn't posted.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. And just, Dr. H., just to go back, you said MTS, just for the benefit of people who
sorry.
aren't in EduSpeak, multi-tiered system, what? just-
Multi-tiered systems of support. So it's what we look at, how to provide reading, math, behavior support to students before we do a referral for special ed, to just make sure that is it something that we just need to reteach, teach a little bit differently before we say that a child has a disability.
So I just wanted to amplify that point, because that program is really working. If we're at 14.4% and our peer communities are at 18%, that, to me, that's data that shows that it's working. So I just wanted to amplify that. Thank you.
I have two more categories of questions. One is the law department policy, right? So this has come up. This is money that's either going to be in the town's budget or the Board of Ed budget, right? And the differentiation, you're being told, is because it's trial expense for a federal case, and therefore it goes to the department. And so can I ask, through the chair, our law committee chair, I believe this has been discussed at your committee, but is that consistent with expectations throughout the town?
I think that this was a compromise position that the town administrator negotiated. I know that the law department feels strongly that the money should rest in the Board of Ed, but they've agreed to foot half and then half of it reside in the Board of Ed. So that's where we stand.
Okay. And then the last issue is the IDEA grant, and maybe this is partly, I don't know how much we can understand this today versus, again, a February conversation, but I know that the letter about identifying the use of funds came late last year, and you identified it as an issue at the end of the year, that you needed to reallocate the expenses attributed to the grant versus what's attributed to the general fund for the benefits portion. But I think we do need to understand the issue because, and it may be a budget issue, but the grant itself, what are you obligated to cover in that grant? And if you're saying that the services that are expected to be covered in that grant don't fit within the funding you're getting, you're saying you really are expanding the funding. I don't know if in the past we have had to for the same services, had some of those funds charged to the general fund already. And so it's just a way of have to report it differently. That some of those 23 people maybe need to be moved to the general fund so that the staff included in the grant can be fully covered over the expectation that their full benefit package is also staying with where the salary costs are. That's a monetary exercise, but the real question is, is the scope of services required by either special education or by a grant somehow changing, therefore putting the pressure now on that grant funds?
So historically, the grant has carried the staff. However, the rate of pay versus the rate that the grant increases has not been moving at the same time. And so I would say last year, the year before, as we started to clean that up, we realized that the salaries just can't keep the grant can't keep up with the salaries, especially with the recently negotiated contract. And so that is something that we're looking at in the budget, is that we do have to look at moving staff out and onto into the regular budget and off the grant in order to fully fund the grant. But that also then means we're adding FTE to the operating budget as well. So trying to be responsible and using the grant as it's supposed to, but knowing that when we can't, we do need those staff members. We could not go back and operate the district with 23 less special ed teachers. Like that would not be something that we would be able to do.
that's a more topic that we'll have to cover more in February to understand these staffing needs, what the obligations are, what the scope, what else you're doing in the district that may or may not be able to help to offset some of that pressure, or is this just an upward pressure of what's happening in the district?
And in the 25 budget, we moved the 2 FTE for that exact conversation. It's in the FY 25. So there's 2 people off the IDEA budget in 25 and added to the table of organization. So out of the growth of the proposed staffing for FY 25, which is still with the Board of Ed, but in the superintendent's budget, it's moving the 2 people, or not those 2 individuals that are causing the problem, but 2 people worth to structurally fix the IDEA grant, at least until further notice.
But that doesn't cover the full benefit cost that you're shifting here. So, I mean, if it covers it, fine, but I would expect that all of the employees within IDEA have, all of their benefit costs are included in that grant portion.
Correct.
And then anything over that should appear in the general fund and subject to discussion over level of services and need. Okay.
Yeah. Last year, when we paid, this is the one that we paid off of the purchase order, basically. But we paid it off of the Board of Ed's general fund.
Came out of the general fund, which, you know,
Correct.
is something you had to do because it happened so late in the year.
Yeah, it was
It's the
very
only way to
late, and
accommodate
then
it.
this year, we just are we know this
Mm-hmm.
now, and it's nothing different, and so we're kind of here more as like, what would be the best also accounting procedure, because we did submit a purchase order, and then Roland rejected it, which was fine, because we wanted to have the conversation about what's the best way accounting, because when it was last year, we did it, but this wouldn't necessarily be from an accounting process. You wouldn't really pay out of 52080, which is, you know, basically, or out of a different line. I mean, benefits should be in benefits, and it didn't make sense accounting wise to do this. So that's why we're kind of here today through an interim appropriation, because we, 1, want to have the conversation and bring it up, and 2, do it with whatever is the best way to do it from an accounting perspective as well.
I think, Leslie, you asked this question, but maybe I didn't understand the answer, so I'm going to ask it maybe in a different way. Just related to the IDEA grant, the 15% that's now being required to cover racial disparity, right? So it looks like, I think what you're saying is that 330,000 is roughly that 15%, which you now have to use that part of the grant to do something very specific, therefore you're short that around 330,000. So the question is that, because we have a lot of initiatives within overall GPS, right, that kind of address the same issue of, you know, racial imbalance, racial disparity, is there anything that we're already doing, and maybe you were asking this, but I'm not sure if you were, that, you know, we could bring into this bucket and then kind of, you know, again, it's just a classification exercise, because that seems to be kind of, you know, this is kind of, we see this all the time in legislation where they kind of throw in something which really doesn't belong specifically here, but, you know, I understand what the motivation of it is.
Right, so it's
Yeah.
for disproportionality. So we are found to be disproportionate in the number of African-American students who are classified as having intellectual disabilities, and we're at high risk for Hispanic students to be classified as having a specific, or having a speech and language disorder. So we're required to have our mandatory set aside for activities specifically to address what can we do proactively to make sure that we're not we're not identifying students who shouldn't be identified because of their race. Out of that 15% set aside, all but, I want to say $68,000 is in staff. So we have one of our behavior team, and I did pick our most expensive staff to put over there. So we have one of our BCBAs who does of all our SEL, so that it's, you know, addressing behavior. We have part of a speech pathologist to address MTSS through speech. We also have our, I believe it is our, I'm trying to think, our reading lab teacher to help address the needs of reading. So we've put staff in that bucket as much as we can, because there is some requirement to look at other programs. It can't just be people. It needs to be other things as well, which we are helping to fund our program, our PINE program that looks at universal design for learning for all learners. So again, looking at how do we prevent students from being identified. So all of that, so we've used that set aside specifically, like I said, for staff. So I tried to reallocate so it impacts us, but as minimal as it can. So even when we get that back, the full funding that would come back would only be about $68,000.
But the disproportionate amount of Black and Hispanic kids that are falling into this category, are you saying, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. Are you saying that we have disproportionate amount because we are not identifying them, or that you're making sure that you're not over-identifying them simply because of their race, or both?
So what the state looks at is they look at your racial profile for the school district, and they look at how many students you have identified in certain categories. And intellectual disabilities actually has very, very specific guidelines, and so when we look at all those students, they're all appropriately identified. In some ways, we need to find other people to identify. We're not doing anything wrong, or our data's not wrong. It's just what the state is looking at. Unfortunately, many school districts get into this when you're looking at a very small population of students. There's not one or two students can change that percentage, can make you disproportionate just because it's a smaller population.
You don't have enough data points, basically. Okay, thank you.
So I have a question here. You presented $2,529,000, basically. And what this is trying to do, I believe, is present a realistic adjustment to this year's budget. But then as I sit here and I listen to the questions being asked, it seems like there's more information that would be helpful for these decisions to get in the February budget hearings. So my question to you is it, or could one think about this as, say, and, I'm just going to throw something out here, but, funding 60% of this or 75% of this at this point in time, with the remainder to be considered for fiscal year, 24, for this current fiscal year, but with a more detailed discussions that will be occurring in February, once you're basically yet another quarter into this, basically it's a quarter, from now to the February discussions, into this fiscal year. And so, I just said 60 to 75% of the requested amount, and it could be, selective here or whatever, but just so that we would, not necessarily be overfunding or would have the more detail that has been discussed by my colleagues. It's a question.
Para, and we're funding that mostly, I just left the transfers for Dr. Jones, but we're funding that through transfers for exactly what you just asked for, taking money out of supplies, services, moving it into regular salaries. Anywhere where there's vacancies, we've also mostly covered. We're also still covering, this year, again, we only have $915,000 again for the day subs. 3 years straight, we've run over 1.8 million. So we're already, we've put in transfers of over $250,000 from other accounts to help pull those out of the pockets. So when people are looking at the money that they're looking at, they only see the smaller amounts. And we've put that into like the day subline already. So it's sitting in there. So I think we're doing that now, like anywhere that we can. And we're pulling money out so that we don't have to come for like an interim for some of these other pieces. I don't think it will this is me just speaking, and Dr. Jones, you can add to it, but I think we're not necessarily increasing even the ability to spend. We're doing the transfers to cover a couple of the other structural issues. We're doing some of the transfers to cover the facilities overtime and the day subs so that we don't have to have an interim for anything else. And even in SESS, like the extra para position funded by the transfers already. I don't know if there's any others off the top of my head, but that's kind of the approach right now.
I just want to add, because we did bring a 2.9% budget this year, we said at the end of last year it had a lot of risk, and we're seeing that, I think, come to fruition. We knew before the first day of school that Stacy was short. Dr. Heigenthaler was going to be short in her budget. And I think, especially when you're talking about special education, we can have one student move into the district. It could be $300,000 or it could be $1 million. And it's a big range, and you can't anticipate that before the year starts. But the sub-budget is very concerning. I think the last couple of years, we did have ARP to offset the sub-incentive, but we also have had contract language where for teachers, when they got put out for COVID, and the nurses made them stay home X amount of days, it didn't count against their sick days. But they were requiring everybody to stay home, even when they felt great. Where now it's a little bit different, and just even how COVID's being managed. I think we were hoping that we wouldn't see as many subs, but what we're seeing now is that teachers, for whatever reason, are incredibly stressed. We're seeing more staff go out on FMLA leaves. We're seeing more staff missing 1 day a week, or, we're really managing that. But where we used to see 70 or 80 substitutes on a day, now it's 100, 120 on many days. And I do get a report every day, and I monitor that closely because I have to look at the fill rate for GEA, because if we're short a sub, then that means our teachers are having to fill in when they're supposed to be planning. So it becomes a big GEA issue. So there is a lot of pressure in this budget.
Friday was over 90, it was over 10% of the teaching staff.
Yeah, it's not,
Filled by subs.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Friday was over 10% of the staff, over 10% of the teaching staff on Friday was filled by day subs, just this past Friday.
Thank you.
And that doesn't count the para subs.
Do we have any other questions over there? I see Dan or Jeff, you're all here.
I wanted to pick up on a point that Mrs. Moriarty touched on. It appears in the second bullet point. It's really a policy issue for the Budget Committee. It doesn't really relate to the school board per se. I have a disquiet with conversations between departments or between agencies of the town in which they're transferring between themselves items of the budget, changing the budget that we structured, without it coming back to the BET. In this particular case, in the law department, we budgeted $1.1 million for outside counsel, I believe $240,000 for the outside counsel that acts as our town attorney, and then, of course, is the various salaries of our in-house attorneys and our one special counsel. On the Board of Ed side, we budgeted $250,000 for their general legal expense in a whole lot of categories. This point, bullet point number 2, suggests to us that last year, over and above that, they incurred about $100,000 of special representation fee on court cases that relate to special ed, and said that at this point, a quarter or a third of the way through the school year, they're already at $84,000. That sounds like they're on track to hit $170,000 or $200,000. And we're being told that that has been quietly transferred back and forth between an agreement, which was reviewed with our law department, for which I'm grateful. But I think proper procedure really would have been that since the Budget Committee and then the full BET set those figures I just recited as budget, if an item, especially an item at 6 figures and more, is being transferred, I think that needs to come back to the Budget Committee and come back to the full BET so that we know about it and we approve it and we're giving it consideration. You're giving, I won't be here, but you're giving it consideration in February and March when we're setting the budget again. I'm uncomfortable with a quiet arrangement of transferring 50% of the legal representation cost on special ed matters which are in court. It doesn't seem appropriate to me.
So Roland or Pete, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any comment on Jeff's comment there in terms of our budget process and doing this on an interim basis?
Well, I thought it was going into effect next budget year.
I'm sorry?
I thought it was going into effect next budget year in 24, 25.
To approve funding now, I don't know what the exact figure is, it suggests that it's 43,000, but
43.
it will, I don't know exactly how that relates to the 100 and the 83 that we're being told, but there's funding being approved now to fill in the shortfall that results from a transfer, not next year, but in the current year.
So,
I don't know that 43 represents it.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you, Roland, just because you don't have
I don't know
the...
that the 43 is a result of a transfer. It's just additional expenses.
Yeah, it's the legal expense, so just to hash the whole conversation out, that basically how we got here, where there is a very specific.
I have the honor of introducing my former boss, Diane. Diane Kelly, who is the president of Greenwich Hospital, and also has taken on additional responsibilities as the chief nursing executive for the Yale New Haven Health System. So Diane has been our president for 3 years and served as our COO prior to that. And before coming to Greenwich Hospital was at Berkshire Medical Center, where Diane had multiple clinical and leadership roles, and for 10 years was the chief operating officer. I have a little bit of background. I want to get the education absolutely correct. With a degree in nursing from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, a graduate of Western New England College with a master's degree in business administration, and a doctorate in nurse practice from the University of San Francisco with an emphasis on executive leadership and population health. We're going to hear an update about Greenwich Hospital from Diane. If we could just simmer down a little bit, team. And we have Noelle Appel, who is the Executive Vice President for Development and is an interim Executive Vice President for Development for a couple of other of the Yale hospitals within our system. And Noelle's background is fairly extensive. She spent time at the New School in New York. Prior to that was at Northeastern University in her professional capacity, as well as Fairfield University. So she's going to speak on the new capital campaign that I mentioned earlier to our membership, which was just launched, the first capital campaign our hospital has had in many years. And with that, you'll know Diane, welcome, thank you.
Very sensitive.
Okay, I hope that wasn't me. Thank you so much, Spike, and it's so wonderful to be with you. And thank you for this kind invitation. And you may be wondering, when you look at Noelle and I together as the president and then chief development officer, and what I'm hoping that you really hear and feel from us is that Noelle and I work very closely together, as she truly is a strategic partner, and much of what we do together, we are looking forward to the future. You know, we definitely will be spending time a little bit on what we are doing today, a little bit about where we've been. Let me make sure I'm getting timing here with this right. I just needed to figure out which arrow. So, but really, much of what we're doing is, you know, making sure we're here for the future, because we both came very, very close at the same time, almost 6 years ago, and recognized that what we had to work with and build on is extraordinary. And Greenwich, and I'm just going to spend a moment on it, is so devoted to this organization, this hospital, and community hospitals really do thrive if the community believes in them. So any opportunity that I have and I'm able to say thank you to community members, I take that opportunity, because in this world of merging acquisitions and becoming part of this system, It's important. It's hard to be out there alone if you're a community hospital. In fact, I don't know that I would want to be part of one that's all by itself, given what I saw during COVID. But we never lose sight of a community hospital has a mission, and that mission is to be very certain that you understand what your community needs and you're developing your programs for the community. And that's where Noelle and I come together and do a lot of strategy, talking with people, looking at our data, making sure that the things that we're building and planning for the future are what the community needs. I always kind of laugh a little bit because very little about what I do is really going to make that much of a difference day to day. I'm thinking, and which is kind of hard. I'm a registered nurse by background, so I like to have action. Like, okay, I did this, and so this patient feels better, and now I can go on to this. And now I really transitioned to say, I'm probably not going to meet a lot of the people that we're impacting, but that's okay. And it's going to be to make sure that we are very strong 3, 5, 10, 25, and another 100 years into the future. So that's a little bit about what we're talking about. Is we're building on something very strong. We have a lot of strong.
We have the benefits there.
I'm sorry?
It says we have the benefit costs. It says to be determined, and there's really no appropriation for that. The way that that's treated in the general fund, even though the general fund is going to absorb this total expense, it's just a reduction of what we call revenue from the other funds for the benefits. So I think in this case, the amount appropriated should be reduced by the $331,000, knowing that our revenue, which we've budgeted around $1 million, will be $331,000 less at the end of the year. Because there's no appropriation for this, it's just a reduction of the revenue.
Which revenue would be offset?
It's in,
You're talking about the IDA grant revenue?
yes, where they pay for the benefits, and we record it as revenue in the general fund, along with revenue from.
So we'll
all-
just be short,
we
we'll
would
be
just
short
but
331.
We don't need an appropriation for that.
I see.
I don't even know how we would book an appropriation for reduced revenue.
Okay, so Roland, help me. So
Let's
what
make
you're-
sure Blaze understands what Roland's saying, so. Are you good
That's
with
why
that?
I put TBD, because it's really not, you really don't need to appropriate the funds to the 900s account.
So Roland, the motion should be 2,528,982 minus 331,483? And so that new number is what coming from Roland? 2 million.
2,197,499.
499. 2,197,499. And, I'm sorry? So, and Roland, in terms of the discussion, I want to ask you, I'm not asking anyone else here. In terms of the attorneys, this is the right thing to do at this point in time? This is an agreement and we appropriate the 43? Yes, okay.
So if I can make a motion to approve an additional appropriation for the Board of Education for $2,197,499.
I'll second that.
So a motion made by Ms. Moriarty, seconded by Ms. Aurora for the new number. Those in favor? Oh, yes, of course.
I just want to ask a process question. I don't think it's a problem because it's a lesser number, but can you just let the Board of Education members know what we did and why? Because they approved one number and we're approving a lesser number.
Yes, yep.
Thank you.
Ready for a vote now? Okay, those in favor? So that motion passes. Oh, excuse me. Was that routine or non-routine?
It's a big number, I would say non-routine.
Non-routine, okay. Okay. So,
Now, our chair can decide to make this routine and not have you come back, but, so speak with Dan.
so we're taking just a little mini break for a second here. But we can get ready to go on to the next one, which is the, thank you very much. We appreciate your help Stacy. I'm sorry? We're going to move on to Parkway, but we're not going to actually start any discussion until Laura returns. So we're talking about ED5, Board of Education, $400,000 for an additional appropriation for the Parkway well. So I don't know. We're just until Laura returns. She's just going to be, she'll be back in a
I
second.
can ask, I guess,
I'm sorry? Is everyone taking a break? Should we all take a break? What? So we're going to continue. We already sort of introduced the item, Laura. We're going to talk about the additional appropriation for the Parkway well for $400,000. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just give a quick, brief overview and then hand it over to Dan. But basically, so the well, the water at Parkway and at the GEM station on the property is provided by a town-owned well, our own well. And we have a pump operator there that's certified by the state. They're on record, Foley's Pump Service. They're our official pump operator with the Department of Health. There is, the drinking water is currently shut off at the GEM station and at the Parkway School, and it has been since before school started, right? A week before school started, did we shut the water off? It was in September. Oh yeah, here's the date of the report, 8/28. So the town, Osprey, the town's environmental engineer had proactively tested the water similar to the golf course at Parkway School with the same well system, and they found that there was the PFAS in the water, which is those microplastics, the forever chemicals that everyone's kind of talking about right now. And so they notified us. We then brought in our certified pump operator, that's all that DHS or DPH talks to. They did the report that's attached here, our official report, confirm that there's PFAS in the water. And so we've basically just been taking the Department of Health's guidance every step of the way. They told us to shut the drinking water off. It's a challenging environment because it's really new in the whole PFAS conversation, where the EPA is still coming up with a rule for PFAS in drinking water. The Department of Public Health in Connecticut has a advisory level, but they don't actually require testing. But once the testing was done and you're notified, you basically they're telling you, well, you're over the advisory limit, so you can't drink the water. Where we're at right now at a high level, and then Dan has the specifics, is we've been working closely with the Health Department, the State Department of Health, DPW, to come up with an approved solution that DPH, they really can't certify the system because there's not an actual rule yet, but they will recommend a filtration system that will filter the drinking water for PFAS at both properties. And that's kind of how we got to where we are right now. The proposal is a little more expanded than kind of what we thought. At first, we thought we were going to be able to put a filter inside the school, basically. So keep the existing pump house, pump the water up there, then filter it once it's in the building. That is not going to work. So the pump house has to be expanded, and the filtration system has to actually be put at the well, and the well will then send the water up to the school and to GEM station, and it'll be filtered water. Am I missing anything?
Well, the filtration isn't actually at the well, it's at the pump house. But that's pretty much in a nutshell where we're at. We've got a plan for the filtration system that was designed by Foley that the state has looked at and are in agreement with us. Again, they won't say it's approval because we don't have a regulatory number. We have a contractor ready to go on an emergency basis, and we're going to be adding on to the existing pump house. It's like a concrete bunker that's 14 feet by 10 feet. It'll be just adjacent to the existing building. So if you know Parkway, the lower level parking lot that's between the school and the GEMS building, it's kind of tucked into the side of the hill. It's going to be just a nondescript concrete building.
Laura?
So obviously, we need to do this. It's a safety issue. You've been giving bottled water out since school started.
Correct.
My only concern, though, is because we're in the midst of this, developing a rule for PFAS. I don't know if we're filtering out, I can imagine I don't know how much we're filtering out versus what a standard could be. I heard today, or I read something today about we want no PFAS in any water. So my question is it this, if you dug a well on the property, would that be a different kind of solution, a new well? Or would you likely have the same issue?
You'd likely have the same issue.
And we don't know the source, it's just everywhere?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But this is also going to protect the water used at GEMS as well as the water used at Parkway.
That's correct.
I was going to ask,
Alicia?
for the homes that are around that area, do you know if they've experienced something similar and how they're solving the problem?
I don't know. Again, it's not something that the DPH is even telling you to go out and test. It's emerging issue is what they relate to it as.
And I missed.
We could ask that question, though. You could follow up with Michael Long from Health Department, our Health Department, because the first selectman did want us to, well, not us, but there was the whole team is the first selectman's office, Michael Long, everybody. They were going to handle neighborhood outreach to the neighbors.
And I missed the first part. Who requested you to do the testing? Was that came from the Department of Health, or that was just something you guys were?
I got a phone call from a company called Osprey, who is the town's environmental consultant, and they said, DPW's environmental consultant, and they did something at the golf course not too long ago, and they said, hey, this is something that's coming up, we want to check the water. Chances of it being a problem are slim to none, but we want to check it anyway. So they came up, and there was, originally they called it elevated levels, which is kind of an odd term because we don't know elevated from what. But the fact that tests were made and they were sent to the state reacted that, hey, you sent us a test, shows results, now you got to put some kind of filtration in.
Now, did the golf? You said that they did it over at the golf course.
Correct.
What happened there?
They put in some type of filtration system. It's a different well operator there. So I'm not sure exactly what it is.
You don't mean, that's probably something we should follow up with, just to see kind of if there's any, learnings from that project and.
We could do that, but we're farther along with DPH. So I would imagine whatever we're doing is probably a little bit further along than what they did at the golf course, even if it was only a year ago. So I think.
But they've already done it, right?
Yeah.
They've already done it. And then can you do those reports that you're referring to, the elevated levels of, you say you don't know what the number is, but they just said it was elevated.
Correct.
Have they shared those reports with you, or those are?
Has who shared?
Osprey, they sent us.
Oh, yes, we have the reports. We have the reports done by the well operator, and all that information's been shared with DPH. And
They actually, Osprey, they did the test, they sent it to us and they sent it to the Connecticut Department of Public Health at the same time.
I'm just thinking, so this is something that obviously needs to get done.
Yes.
There's not a question about that. I'm just trying to understand, looking back on it, obviously, what have we been exposing the kids to? Is it something like that? I don't really know much about this, so I don't have much background in this. Was it something that's always been around? It's just becoming an
I think
alert today?
this isn't as pertinent to our discussion now.
I'm sorry?
Is this pertinent?
It's everywhere. Like, I just got a letter from Connecticut Water at my house that PFAS is in my water, provided by Connecticut Water. Connecticut Water and Aquarion are both being sued right now. If you've seen the news recently.
I've not followed that discussion.
For PFAS, it's very recent. This is going to be, I was a volunteer firefighter before I came here. All the foam that we use in firefighting, all PFAS in it. Sprayed everywhere. Fill up rivers all over the place. It's kind of like the next what is it, DDT or asbestos, kind of one of those chemicals that's just everywhere. Yeah.
Of course.
I have personally interest. I have a lot more information I can give you.
Okay, I'll take it offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just related to that, I know that you must have a standard schedule where you're testing the water. I think several years ago you had lead issue or in the pipe. So I don't know if you take this opportunity to review those standards and the frequency of the testing, and if there's an opportunity during this project to add filtration or other elements you're trying to get out of the water supply, but has that considered into the design here?
We're under the guidance of the state, so whatever they tell us to do, we do. And if we miss a test within 30 days, we're notified. So we've been pretty good. But as far as, any emerging issues, we're on it. And so far, they haven't said you need to upgrade your filtration system other than what we're doing now.
After this happened too, we actually just proactively have done drinking water tests at 4 of the other schools that aren't required to have drinking water and get city water provided. And now, just to be safe too, we're also doing the rest of the schools too within the next couple of weeks.
And for lead too.
For lead, not for PFAS though. See, PFAS, there's no, well, it's in Aquarian's water.
Right.
So,
There's no escaping it right
at the moment.
So, any more discussion? No? So,
Motion? I'll make the motion to approve an additional appropriation of $400,000 for the Parkway Well filtration project.
I'll second it.
those in favor?
I didn't mention,
Did you say routine or non-routine?
I would say this is routine, because there aren't really no alternatives.
So now that Leslie has said that, is everyone fine with routine? Nisha, fine with routine? Yeah, okay, good. So that passes unanimously, 400. Okay, so now we will move on here to our next project, which is an additional appropriation, in this case for $3,200,000. It's an additional appropriation for the Hamilton Avenue HVAC system. So this actually didn't have very much attached in our package, at least as far as I know. So it had the current cost of the rental system, but it didn't include the memorandum that was in the package that was given to the BOE. So Roland has since sent it at least to the Budget Committee, and we can make sure it goes to the full BED. So.
Pretty sure I included it when I sent it over.
Anyway, so do we have any conversation about this? This is Hamilton Avenue, basically having a thermal well system that was having, we'll say, issues, and hence, because of temperatures varying, and I guess the difficulty to go between seasons, is this fair enough in layman's language? A alternative backup system was brought in for the fall and the winter, and will continue through the spring. And so we see some costs for that system of, please help us. It was a lot of money. Of $411,000, $455,000, is that right? That's what the temporary HVAC unit that's being rented costs. And so I guess also you're requesting an additional $190,000 for the professional services to, I guess, design everything, is that correct? And then you're estimating without having the contract yet, that the cost of the new HVAC system will be approximately $2,500,000.
Yeah. Yep.
Have I explained this good enough? Or?
That was a good job. Yeah. I think that's pretty much every piece. I just forwarded the email from November 1st. There's a few things. So we had in capital last year, if you recall back, we had the replacement for the system. We then didn't fund the request till we got more information. So we then brought in, we worked with the Energy Management Advisory Committee to bring in a geothermal expert. They did the system was too far for them to handle. So they then recommended another geothermal expert from Colorado. They came in, did an assessment of the system, and basically gave 3 options. One they didn't recommend. I don't remember what it involved, but it's in the report that I had sent over. The other option was either to restore geothermal, which they kind of gave a weak endorsement of, to be honest, for being the geothermal expert, and then they also going to a traditional system. The opinion kind of us has been anyways like it was last year, which is going to a traditional system makes more sense now that we've had it studied based on our own capacity and the original design problems with the geothermal system from the original implementation of it at the school. So where we're at right now, then separately, why we're doing this as an interim is because in August, the temperature of the building, the geothermal system just was not working. The beds are overheated. The temperature inside the school, right before school started, was 86 degrees, and that was with the system fully running in cooling mode. We can't obviously bring people in when the building's 86 degrees to start school. So we brought in, on an emergency contract, we brought in the United rental. There's a temporary HVAC unit right now that we're renting every month that's set up outside the school. That's how we're running HVAC. We've since got the report from the geothermal person, and then we have Lero that's been going through the actual system and designing a traditional system. They gave us, it's taking a little longer than we probably thought on the system, but we're here before you now for 2 reasons. One, the timing. So we still won't go to the RTM until next month, which then means for us to get a contract up and going, we're not going to be able to go out to bid until January. And hopefully we want to get this fixed right in the beginning of the summer so that it's back up and running for the start of school year next fall. So that's kind of why the timing looks the way it does right now. They gave us a estimate based on where they're at right now of kind of like a 1.2 to 3 million, anywhere depending on it really depends on, correct me if I'm wrong, the distribution equipment throughout the building is the driving unknown piece at the moment, which is why it's taking the engineers a long time to kind of go through what we're going to put back in. The easy part is putting in the main part of the system, but it's how it's going to be mapped out through the rest of the building. Is the piping sizes the right sizing across the whole building, the old part of the building, the new part of the building, for a traditional system? But that's where we're at. This is the full cost of the overall problem that we know of right now, which is the renting of the unit, the problem the labor that was involved with that, the engineering and design, and the assessments of the geothermal, and then an assumption of 2.5 million-ish for the new replacement system with an efficient system, but a traditional HVAC system at the school. Do I have that right?
Yes. Very good. Thank you.
You have any questions?
I do. And I listened to the Board of Ed discussion about this topic too, which helped give a little background. The report that you forwarded recently, pretty technical. But I read that the geothermal says recommended. And I didn't recall the conversation about really comparing your option of trying to maintain some part of the geothermal system to get the energy efficiency moving forward versus transitioning to just a traditional system. And so that's the open question in my mind, is how you got to that decision and whether, those criteria maybe in a different scenario, you'd come out with a different answer.
You want me to answer first?
Go ahead.
I think there's two things. One, we have the report from the geothermal expert that we had shared, but we do not have yet like a specific cost estimate of that rehabilitation. Even now, I mean, Dan's asked multiple times, and it's just, I think, been the overall problem with having someone go through the geothermal system, has even been getting people to respond about this. Regardless, just to be blunt, I think that based on the assessment and the comparison of traditional and geothermal, we would be recommending going with a traditional system at that location
Why?
for the following reasons. The original, the system's already, coming up on, going to be close to 20 or 15 years old. It's not designed properly in the first place. It was not used properly, so the beds are overheated. And it was not used properly because in our current structure, we do not have the resources to be on forefront technology, basically, is what I would say. We're trying to standardize the systems across the district right now with systems that we have very capable expertise in, where we can do a lot of the work of our own work in-house on the systems. And until there's something fundamentally different about the market or about the structure of the facilities department, I'm not going to speak for you, but I don't think we would be wanting to proceed with this. Yeah, I mean, just to even get a consultant out here, that's a good point. We had to get someone to look at it. We brought in Energy Management Advisory Committee. They then brought in like their main person that did the whole presentation at their event. They looked at it. They then didn't want it. It was way outside their wheelhouse. Then to find someone, there's no one in the region that was capable of going through this system because they're not that common out here. So we don't really have people of that level of expertise. So we're going out to Colorado just to get someone to go through this. And they're great. I mean, they're really, really good. The guy was really, really good, and he knew the stuff well. But that's just like to even get someone, this region's just not there yet for us, I would say.
I'm just going to ask, is it their climate is better attuned to this kind of system? They're more temperate, in terms of less extremes than we would have?
It depends where the system is. And again, I'm not an expert, but just from what we're gathering from reports and speaking to the experts, it's not only temperature, it's the makeup of the ground, it's how the equipment is maintained, it's how the equipment is installed, it's how it's operated. There's a lot of factors involved that, in short, the system that's there failed across the board. And we have experts telling us that it wasn't installed right, it wasn't operated right, it wasn't probably designed right. But that goes back 20 years.
The obvious question, we're looking at ways to cut energy costs across the
Correct.
district, and you've been very, at the forefront of doing a lot of the things in your buildings. This is one of those things you only get certain chances to make that kind of dramatic change, right? And this, in theory, could be a dramatic change, and this is where I don't have the knowledge about the cost benefit of moving forward. I don't want to look backwards as to how we have this problem, if we can fix it, if we can find an outside company to maintain it for us. If it's a matter of our knowledge base to maintain it or to provide the service every day in that building, you would think that's a solvable problem that's separate from the decision, or that's related, but shouldn't be the key factor in the decision of, can you make the system work and does it provide the benefit moving forward versus a very traditional system at the moment. And so a design problem, harder to fix. We didn't use it properly, so things are breaking sooner. That's something you can fix. And, when I look at this report, it says recommended under the maintaining the hybrid ground thermal system. So what I'm reading, and the little that I can, what I'm reading in the report doesn't, is not consistent with potentially the discussions you may have had with the consultant with their underlying analysis of the system. But I think before we make this kind of change and a big upfront cost of making the change, want to make sure we fully vetted the opportunity of.
So just to add to that, if you read into that, the fourth line down, plate and frame heat exchangers, distribution pumps, and Florida water source heat pumps and controls would be fully removed, and some repiping would be needed in the boiler room.
Right.
That means rip out everything except the wells that are in the field. So you're looking-
But that may still be the right answer if we get a cost benefit going forward. We shouldn't be making the decision just on the upfront investment cost. That's important, but it should be what it's going to do for us over the longer term.
Yeah, I see.
So, but, you know, you don't have the information on the upfront cost. I don't know how much you're ripping out to put in the traditional system too, right? The wells are going to remain there, but is everything else coming out or using some of the existing piping? And
We did just before you jump to just on Leslie, the first company we brought in, the concept was ideally we just would want someone to do like a PPA of the existing system so that we don't have to maintain it. Probably going forward, you can do your own, would be worth doing analysis of geothermal in general, what the model will be town-wide, because we should standardize too, so we do the same thing across all of our facilities whenever we go with a different system. The company that we had, that came in, they won't do one because, one, it's not their system, and two, because of the condition of the system. The first concept was to do that, would be, okay, we don't have the capacity to handle it, so we'll do a PPA. They can repair the system and then take the credits, but they didn't have any. They said, we'll do a new one somewhere else, but we're not taking this over. And that's how we ended up where we're at now.
So I just have a more technical, while we're just talking about this in this paragraph, you know, and it talked about basically the corrosion of the system and some other things that really made me nervous on the school that we had to replace because of mold. But does this have to be under the building? This is under the building, these are pipes that are down below in a basement or something like that?
Well, the wells themselves are under the field.
Well, I understand that,
And
but
then
I
the
was
pipes
just
come into the building like a typical.
lower level, underneath the
Correct.
building.
Correct.
Okay, that's the only question I had, just based on this one section. Thank you. I will speak later, but Nisha?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I just saw the report. Now, I had two questions. One was, what was did the Energy Committee, I think it's been renamed, what did they opine upon this recommendation, or did they not? And then the second part, you know, I was just going to go back to what Dan was saying, that, you know, the challenges of a geothermal, and I just kind of wrote down, Dan, some of the things you said, that this wasn't designed well, maybe it wasn't used well, maybe some of it has to do with the ground conditions were more difficult or challenging than we had anticipated. You know, my understanding of especially how some of these systems work is, you know, the reason that they're not so prevalent in areas like this, because the concept of geothermal is to, you know, you're exchanging heat from higher to lower temperatures and lower to heat. So the whole concept works well when you're in heating mode or cooling mode. And this report kind of touches upon that on the, you know, in the fourth sentence where, you know, it says during shoulder months, it can be a challenge, right? Where you have to maybe need heating one day and then cooling the next day, or morning to afternoon, kind of like where we are right now, where some days we need the heat on, some days we're like, I need the AC on, right? So in New England, in our climate, where we are, one of the big challenges of, you know, again, what I've looked at in terms of geothermal, because I know a couple people even in town have explored that for their homes, that's one of the big challenges of that system, right? And that's why you do see it in a Colorado where it's maybe cooler more, or in a Florida or a Texas where it's warmer more. But in our areas where it's more seasonal and we have these shoulder months, it is a bit of a challenge.
It really taxes the system trying to go back and forth, because
Right.
it's almost like you have to evacuate the whole system from heat to bring in
That's right.
cool, and it doesn't happen overnight.
That's right, and I know you mentioned this at one of our building committee meetings as well, some of these challenges of,
Yeah.
and I think it's really important, because I think the learning here is really great. I think this report is really thorough as well, and I would totally support the direction that you guys are headed on this, because I do think that is the right path forward, and to also understand that, you know, sometimes these ideas look great in concept, and you want to get some of the benefits out of it. But I think, looking ahead, I think we need to, at some point, make a decision on how we're going to move forward. I would be supporting of this support. I don't know where this group is, but I do think that's the right path forward, and I think it would be really great for you to even maybe put a memo on that so we can share that with, because as you know, there are other committees that are also discussing this. Not just your learnings, but also some of the observations of actually maintaining the existing system that you have. Because I think it's important that we don't lose that information as we go from point A to point B.
And the other point I want to make, when we say traditional system, we're not talking about a furnace where somebody's throwing coal into a furnace. We're talking about modern technology, but something that's we're using across the district. We know how it operates. We know how to maintain it. We have the right people. I'd like more people to help me maintain it. That's for another meeting. But trying to understand the geothermal system, it's difficult. It really is. And you would need somebody on it the whole time. The system that they're proposing, that Lero's proposing, we don't have it on paper yet, would be very similar to what we have at, probably at North Street.
Can you leverage the same ducting, or
That's what they're looking at right now, and that's why that's one of the problems, it's mostly piping that's through the building, and it's 15 years old now. With newer technology, maybe the piping is smaller. We're looking at using the same paths. That's great, except now we might have to take down ceilings. There's an added cost for that. So it's not a cheap endeavor, but $20,000 a month to rent something.
And then what about the existing wells? Would you leave them?
We'd
leave them there?
we'd evacuate them, and either we could fill them with some kind of cementitious product. The material in there right now is not leaching into any field where we know that there's no leaks.
Is that typically what you would do? You would abandon them, or typically?
But to rip them up,
It's too much.
we just put $500,000 into that field. I don't think we'd want to rip it up.
But there's no risk in leaving it?
No, we would evacuate the material that's in it and have that disposed of.
Okay, thank you.
So, again, are there any feelings? I would support this project, but I would like to support it with an additional condition. And the condition would be on the $2,500,000, which is my understanding, you certainly need the 411 and the 190,000, is that correct? And the additional money is needed just so you can go out to bid and so forth. So I would support this, but my condition might be something like subject to the final review of the system to be used at Central Middle School, and that it be consistent with this HVAC system with commonality that you're going to install. And that it's my understanding that it already determined at Central Middle School that they would be using a traditional HVAC system. So that, the discussions that now seem to be, and I don't know what happened yesterday in the meeting, but I did see the agenda, terminated, just so wasting time, and start going back in the direction of consistency in the school, the kind of things that you were talking about earlier in this discussion. So that's what I would like to propose.
Just to clarify, the condition would, I think this is actually a really great condition, because, Dan, this is going back to what we're saying, that, you want to have your learnings and be able to share them across the district, right? So we have another project right now, which is going down the or at least exploring it, right? And you're here today saying, well, we tried it and it didn't work for many different reasons. Maybe it was the climate, maybe it was the ground. We don't even know, right, exactly why. But we're going to move away from it. That's a decision we know we have to make. So if there's another project that's exploring it, can we make it part of a, at least a district-wide initiative at this point, that we're not going to go down this path until we know, until we have the bandwidth, right, on the maintenance side, or until we have more information to be able to support it. I'm not sure if condition is the right word, but I think the spirit of it is that let's not keep repeating the same mistake if we know there is an issue. condition would be you're up against a committee, but you could put it into your ed specs, right, into some of your ed specs that we want a traditional system simply because that's our maintenance. You know, that's the constraints of our existing, I don't know what you think of that, or.
Maybe I'll comment before you, Leslie. I think there's two things. One, the concern about the condition would be the timing of like tying it to Central Middle School's timing, like say a decision. I don't want to, because we are either renting this equipment now or like the system has to get done. And we'd really like to be able to move forward with it without conditioning it to the decision of another project. But I do think, if I can answer this question appropriately, I know that the administration of GPS and the Board of Ed had made it very clear to the Central Middle School Building Committee, for example, about the direction they wanted to go in for now with the HVAC system. I think that they will follow up after the meeting yesterday with a clarifying direction to the Building Committee along the same lines about the system. And I might recommend, so what we're doing, our approach with solar with the town right now, with some of these systems, I was just actually talking to Dan, we're not necessarily entities that have the capacity that I would say of staff to be on the forefront of technology, maybe for the reasons like with this geothermal system. Not that we're inherently opposed or against. What we're doing with solar, and I think we've coordinated it with every entity in town for the moment, is we're doing solar together. We're also doing virtual net metering together. So we issued joint RFP for virtual net metering, and then we come up with a standard approach. We'll split the accounts if we get an award, do it the same way. With solar, we came up with the agreement to do solar together as well, and rather than a piecemeal approach where there's different systems in different areas. The test case for everybody, which is also shared by us at the schools, is Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. So the RFP, I almost see that kind of like as a joint RFP. It's really for the town, it's for one building, but we did that together. We're not necessarily evaluating it, but we're evaluating that system and the results and kind of the direction the town wants to go in. And it's probably a question that the finance board should weigh in on, because we can come up with an approach of the power purchase agreements versus buying the systems and coming up with a process and a standard for that. It's probably a good idea to do for some of these other emerging technologies on the buildings as these questions come up, so that we build a shared capacity across our two entities as well. Like our DPW is building the same capacity that we can build out at facilities. That's been our approach on solar. We're going to see how it goes with Eastern Greenwich Civic Center before we go put it on a school exam or a different town building, so that we do the same thing and we're all on the same page. It might be the same way to do it with geothermal. So I'd be cautious on tying the funding to another building committee's project. But I think the question has largely been answered at the moment and will probably be answered again for the building committee, and it'll hopefully be made fairly clear.
I'm sorry, you're talking about something yesterday? I don't know what happened yesterday.
That was the meeting.
Election day, other than that.
Yeah, you might have been a little busy, but there was a building committee, well, you were there, I don't want you to speak for it. I mean, it was back on the agenda.
It's back on the agenda. Not sure how, but
I saw it on the agenda, that's why I'm bringing up the topic.
Right,
Because I
so-
thought that the meetings I had attended, that you had recommended a more traditional system that your people
More
could
than
maintain.
once.
What?
more than once.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
So,
why I'm
I mean,
saying,
I've heard you.
I don't know how it got
that I thought had been already decided, and maybe it needs to now be written into the ed specs, which I think Ms. Aurora just, said. Something needs to be done here. And we're taking a different approach.
I think we're commingling two projects. I don't think there's any need to try to link this appropriation to Central Middle School there.
Yeah.
But the problem that I have is if our standard is always we're going to keep doing what we know, we never have the benefit of change and getting the benefit of new technology. And I don't know, I'm not saying that I think this is the right one. This is a geothermal system put in 15 years ago. There's different and new information. It may have been done, it may not have been done correctly. But I'm not, based on the report that you've submitted in writing, it doesn't, partly because we don't have the cost and then the payback down the line, you can't compare what the system can and can't do. And I know that our staff is not trained to be able to maintain the system. That's a given. So unless we know that we can support the system going forward, then that tells us, no, we shouldn't be going forward with it because we'll end up in the same place. I understand that. But I don't know, if our POCD talks about looking at opportunities for energy efficiency, and we've got the Energy Management Committee, and I know sustainability is different, but there are a lot of words out there to say, can we, in our decision-making, keep us on the looking forward and not looking backwards? And I just want to make sure we don't have a missed opportunity here.
Can I just real quick? You got to look back. You make mistakes, you learn from that. You have a mistake at Hamilton Avenue. Whose fault it was doesn't matter. It's a mistake. It's going to cost you money either way. You have a mistake at Glenville. You have a solar system at Glenville. It's not operating, hasn't operated. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. You can all look up the name Solyndra. That's another discussion. I'm all for moving forward with modern technology. I've been charged with maintaining and operating the building. We don't have the capacity. If somebody's going to promise me that we have the capacity, manpower, technology to run an advanced system like that, I am all for it. I think geothermal systems are the greatest thing in the world, but they've got to be designed right, installed right, operated right, and maintained right. 3 of those things I control, and I can't. So that's my feelings.
So what I was trying to do was come up with a solution so we could move this project forward, which I fully support, replacing a system that doesn't work with a new system that's consistent. I mean, look, Leslie and I were on the MESA Building Committee, and there's amazing, technology for sound, acoustics, lighting, et cetera. But there's only one person that can operate all of that for the town, and he isn't on the maintenance staff. So, there's always this balance of moving forward and using technology, which I support. But I'd like someone to, I started to craft something. If it's not exactly the right words, we can put a time frame on it. We can always look, this board has also waived conditions, but I think that at least this would give some direction in terms of focus on a building committee that seems to be working backwards rather than forwards. Nisha?
Yeah, I'm hearing that let's not tie it to Central, and I kind of agree because we're going to jump into a political thing we don't really want to get into. So I kind of agree with that, meaning one committee, political, not in that sense, but, 2 different groups. But I do think, Dan, what you just said, that looking back and learning from mistakes that we've made, doesn't matter how we got there, but that's where we are. I think, again, memorializing those thoughts and putting it on a sheet of paper, because I've heard you come to these building committee meetings and say exactly what you just said, but the way these building committees are structured is if a couple members want to go through with that, and you have 6 people at a meeting or 7 people at a meeting, if 4 people want it, it goes through, right? That's just the structure of the way our system is set up. I think it would be really helpful if we had a document, so maybe this could be a creative condition from the Board of Ed. It doesn't have to be related to Central. It can say, well, just exactly what you said, there's 4 things that are required for a geothermal to work, its design, its implementation, its maintenance, and it doesn't mean you're for it or against it, but you don't have currently at the Board of Ed the ability to be able to operate or maintain these systems. And I think you need to put that on paper in a document so we can then go to the building committee and saying, listen, this is the position of Dan, of our head of facilities, and that's, I think that would influence the discussion and also slow it down, or at least put some, because we're all on the same page, at least not all of us, but at least like I think I am with you, where I'm saying, I love these systems, I think these are great, but we're not there yet in terms of a municipality to use taxpayer dollars to be investing in this until we know we can support them 100%. It's not fair to our residents. We can do it on a private scale, we can do it individually, but to use public stuff. So I think if you could maybe put together a one-pager, would that be an appropriate condition perhaps, just to have
I
a
think
learning?
a condition that just a short couple of lines, and then, if people can improve upon it, between now and Tuesday, that's great. But I'd like to, put something out there at this point in time and say, we could support it that way. Otherwise, I guess, but I think it's critically important that we think not only about new ideas or systems, and I do support that, but also how we can maintain them. And I think we have to be pragmatic and look at all the costs related, just the way you're talking about, looking at solar. And, experiments are good, but we've had experiments and they have not succeeded. So, I think proceeding with this, look, first I should thank you, because we looked at this in the budget cycle and we said, no, we're not ready. We'd like you to, get a report. It never occurred to us that you couldn't find any firm around here that would be able to give you a good report. So now you've gone to Colorado, where the temperature is much more temperate. It's just, you don't have that variety that you have here because I've lived in Colorado. So I will make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve $3 million. Oh, it's $3,101,055. If I got that, because I'm working off of. Okay, 3,000,002, of which $2.5 million will be conditioned with a subject to release of a.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the October 12th, 2023 Board of Selectmen meeting. And as always, we will start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I just ask you all to remain standing just for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I ask that everybody remain standing for a moment of silence for all those.
Construction Maintenance Department, whatever you call it over there.
Short.
No, I'm going to first make sure that.
Raising my hand.
No.
I have to leave.
Oh, okay. So something on that idea. Does that work for you?
Can I?
Let Laura.
Okay, Laura.
So there's a lot happening right now. We're having a very interesting policy discussion about energy management and sustainability in the context of a budget committee meeting. It's an important discussion. I'm not sure this is the right forum for that. We're having a conversation about linking this decision with a completely separate process for a building that hasn't been constructed yet. That doesn't make any sense to me. I think, the whole purpose of having people sit on building committees from the Board of Ed is to share this information, and it is happening. It has been happening. There was a very lengthy meeting, a couple of meetings. The Design Review Committee meeting was very a deep dive into what works, what the facilities recommends. Then it was followed up by HVAC decision, and now it's being reopened. I understand these are really important policy decisions, but what I'm seeing in front of me is an interim appropriation to provide heating and cooling for an elementary school that at the end of August was 86 degrees. So I want to make sure that we solve the problem that we're currently facing. So I don't want a condition. I want to approve the $3.2 million so they can proceed apace with getting this issue solved. I would like a follow-up, because at 1.2 to 3 million is a pretty big range. You've narrowed on 2.5, but I'd appreciate once it's designed and you have a preliminary estimate, let us know what it is. But I really just wanted to move on this item.
Okay, so great. I put forth a motion. Is there a second for my motion?
I mean, can I, listen, I want to support a condition that we can all get behind, meaning, you know, is there, I was looking at Dan and Blaze, is the memo idea something you would, if we don't want to tie it to CMS?
But that's at a point in time. What if they change their minds for a future project? I don't want to.
Yeah, but that's, Laura, what I'm saying is so that, I think your concern as well, right? That you don't want to tie it to another project. I understand that. So I think one of the things we're saying is we don't seem to have the learnings shared from
That's a
project
separate
A to project
conversation.
B. Right, but now is a good opportunity to get that learning, because I don't know how else I can get that learning memorialized. So if it's a matter of putting together a one-page memo of why we are doing a HAMAV HVAC 3.2 million appropriation, I think it's fair to say, well, I would like a one-pager on what happened, why it went wrong, and why I would not recommend it for future projects until I have the resources to be able to support it.
Do I have
I'll
a,
write a memo to the board, and it'll go from there.
Okay.
so it's subject, so instead, this is subject to. No, I'm not withdrawing. No, that I want a condition, and so I think.
Subject to a memo by Mr. Watson to the Board of Ed regarding your learnings and your recommendations. It can be as short, as brief as you want, but it's exactly what, everything you've just said in a one-pager. And I think it's just incredibly helpful to have it shared with other members. So I would support that, if you're okay with that.
So, I mean, just subject to a memo. and
Subject to memo by Mr., you know, we're doing this in good faith. You're going to put together a one-pager, one memo to the board. You can, it can be to both boards, it can, whatever the protocol is, Board of Ed and BET, just a document saying your learnings from the HVAC, from the geothermal that was installed, and recommendations of moving forward.
So lessons learned, are you
That's-
saying lessons learned on the,
I don't want to make it burdensome for you, just exactly what you just said. Lessons learned from the HAMAV project geothermal installation, what went wrong, and then also your recommendation going forward in terms of future HVAC installs, right? That, yeah.
That's a
Yeah, if we
very
do a
lengthy
memo,
condition.
it would be on the facilities, you could say the lessons learned at HAMAV, and then the requirements that the facilities department would need to proceed with a different system.
Well, I don't, not requirements for geothermal. I think would be lessons learned and, which is what we just discussed, but also where we sit today. As of today, and the memo will be dated as of November 8th, 2023, the Board of Ed does not have the resources available to support a geothermal.
I think what you're doing is you're trying to create a policy statement because you're having trouble in another committee, and it has nothing to do with this request here. I think, I don't quite understand why you feel like that.
I'm not having any difficulty. I'm not having, no difficulty. I wasn't even
Well,
at the
then-
meeting yesterday.
But then,
I just know the discussion just keeps coming up at that committee level. And I think, Dan, you just even coming to the meetings over and over again and saying the same thing is silly. You should just have a memo, just deliver it to them, and then.
but then why
you don't need
tie it to this appropriation?
Because it's exactly related, because that's the discussion we're having. It's regarding the Hamilton Ave. Listen, we can do it in good faith. It doesn't have to be conditioned. I'm really supporting, we need to move forward with this project.
no, I think it should be a condition. Some, a memo related to lessons learned on Hamilton Avenue geothermal.
I mean, is that something you guys would be okay with? If it's something you're okay with, we'd like to.
I prefer there isn't a condition on it, but, Dan is going to write the memo. So, I don't know if you
It's
feel
good-
in good
I mean-
faith, but he's going to write it. He just said it here, and he says it all the time to the Board of Ed. He's going to say
So
the
he can
same
get it,
thing.
he can get it done by, Tuesday,
But he'll have
and
it
we
before
won't have a
Tuesday.
condition.
It's a cut and paste, it's already written.
That's
It's
actually a
already
great
been
idea. If you
How
can
about
do
you
it before.
condition it on Tuesday if you don't like the memo?
I'm sorry?
How about you condition it on Tuesday, make it non-routine. If you don't like the memo, condition it on Tuesday.
That's a great idea. Yeah, because this is in good faith. I don't
In
really
good
wanna-
faith, he'll write the memo. If you don't like it, condition it Tuesday.
We'll like it, just get it done by.
Yeah,
just
and we'll get it done by Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay,
write
so,
it.
so
Yeah.
I will withdraw my motion.
And there's no condition, so.
What?
There's no condition now, right? So let's just make a motion did somebody already make a motion to approve the 3.2?
No, normally Leslie makes the motion.
And I'm not going to make the motion.
I'll make the motion to approve 3.2 million for the Hamilton Ave HVAC. No conditions.
We second it? No. Okay, so, and I'll second that. Those in favor? Those opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Oh, you're abstaining, okay.
I'm abstaining because I think there's missing information.
Because you abstaining because why? I didn't hear what you
There's
said.
missing information.
Missing information. Okay, so motion passes by 2-0-1 with Ms. Aurora and Tarkington voting for and Ms. Moriarty abstaining. Okay, so now we have, is there any further discussion, or do we have a motion for a bonding resolution for the Parkway Well and the Hamilton Avenue HVAC programs?
I can't make that motion because I didn't support the Ham Ave, and the Parkway Well could be funded out of capital
No,
non-recurring.
I'm sorry, I've made the motion before and voted for it on other projects where I voted no, because if the project passes, it needs financing.
You want me to make the motion, Leslie? Yeah. Okay, I'll make the motion for 3.6 million, a bonding resolution for the Parkway Well and Hamilton Ave HVAC.
And I'll second that motion. Those in favor? Those opposed? Those abstaining? Okay, so that motion has passed.
And my rationale there is I don't know what will happen with the 3.2 million, and we can fund the Parkway Well 400,000 out of capital non-recurring, so we have a funding source.
Leslie, I just want to be clear that the missing information that you're discussing, it's just because you're not sure how much it's going to cost? I just wasn't clear.
One, we're missing the cost, which I know you've been asking for, of what maintaining the system is, but I also, I need their the report interpretate.
What might be helpful too for you is just some logic behind why is this happening this way too? And, personally, you don't want to see necessarily more fossil fuels going into the air. But from a pragmatic standpoint, the reason if we just keep it focused, we change the conversation a little bit to other projects globally. But on this project specifically, why are we doing it this way? And we've been asking for the cost estimates. But regardless, we have a system that we know that we can get up and running that already is not working and has kids there now. And we've had to close the building before, move kids around. It's not like it's necessarily just this charging forward for the sake of charging forward. There were a lot of operational thoughts that went in. I mean, we really did try to go the geothermal route, like bring in an expert, not just go for the sake of going. There's also the operational considerations, which the building's open, we're renting the system right now. It could be viewed as a short-term cost, but even if the system ends up delaying this and we miss the mark for next summer, then we're going to be back to another school year. We can only do the work in the summer. So if we just keep the thought process for you focused on this conversation for this one project, there's also the operational pieces that we did think through, and that's why it's not necessarily the timing of this is not worth waiting for more analysis on the geothermal, because we're really getting to a point where we can't wait any longer. We're going to miss the window for next summer. So
And that's a good
some
point.
thoughts
I
about it.
appreciate that, but.
Just so you know some more
But
background.
along with the potential use of the geothermal, and I'm just keeping open the questions about it. It's not just the cost, and it would be the time. Is that something that could be implemented if you got the information quickly this summer? Then the timing is the same on the building. I don't know how long it takes to implement. That's the open question. And the report you got, I get I understand it's not a design for it, so there may be too much gap in terms of what information is not available to be able to make that judgment. I just don't know.
So I thank you.
Is this routine or non-routine?
Definitely not.
I think just for, you heard the discussion, I think this is non-routine. Maybe it'll be routine after we receive the memo. I don't know. I mean, Dan makes that final decision, as you know, and for the chair, for the BET meeting. That meeting is Tuesday evening. But right now, we didn't say, I would assume that's non-routine. Leslie, would you agree with that?
Wasn't my motion, but I would think so.
Yeah, non-routine. What was the vote? The vote was 2-0-1. So the vote on the additional appropriation was 2-0-1. And this vote on the bonding resolution was similar, 2-0-1. So I thank you very much. Thank you both. Of course.
Who's been sitting there?
This is our new hire. He's my number 2, my Assistant Director of Operations, Julian Della Rosa.
Nice to meet you.
These are the members of the BET.
We're not usually this difficult, so.
Yes, they are.
He's the new assistant director. He just started on Monday, last
Oh,
Monday.
So welcome, and we look forward to, having you on board. And I'm sure Dan welcomes having additional assistance.
Absolutely.
And you can see, that we are concerned about these things and making sure that, our properties are well-maintained and also that they're consistent and make it easier for our staff to all do the work too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving right along. Affordable Housing Trust. There's no update, right? Is that my understanding? But we hope to get this done before year end with our current BET? Yes. Our next is new business. Is there any economic conditions report? I think that it's too early in the month. When you're the 8th of November, it's and that it's so early because of really multiple holidays. The Veterans Day holiday, town hall's closed on Friday, and then the Thanksgiving weekend holiday. Okay, so the next item we have is a very patient person who's probably learned a lot about what goes on in town. The approval of increased alarm registration fees. Is that right?
Right.
Roland, did we have a memo on this?
I did.
Where'd it go? So it's my understanding that what is being requested is the piece that's in a hot pink kind of, or peach color highlighter. It says, "The Alarm Appeals Board unanimously voted to ask the BET to raise the annual registration fee from $20 to $30. This is for alarm. And increases the equivalent of a less than 3% annual increase from 2009 to 2024. So do I have a motion to approve this request?
Can I ask, I've just read this memo, sorry that it was buried here, so I didn't catch it.
Rick, would you like to
Yeah,
come up
I
and
just have-
join us? You can either sit over there at the desk, which is probably the nicest, just sit down.
So if I just understand the rationale here, there's a large number of registrations, and you talk about the revenue from them. What costs does the town have in monitoring? Is it just the police response?
First thing is the town, in terms of actually going on alarm, responding to alarm, huge cost. Every time you roll a fire truck, police car, and it's more than one fire truck.
Oh, yeah.
The microphone, it's right there. And you just press it, make it green.
Okay, there we go. It's more than one fire truck and it's more than one police car, and it costs lots of money to respond. So back in the 80s, they created the alarm ordinance so that people had to register their alarms. So we had key holder information, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also, because people acknowledge that we have an alarm ordinance by registering their alarm, they know that there's fines involved if you have a false alarm. So the first thing is we try to educate the public. When people come before us, we try to tell them, how not to come before us ever again. We do have some people who come before us more than once. But the goal is to get people to register their alarm so we have key holder information, so when the cops or the fire department shows up, they know who to call because the people aren't home typically. And we don't charge enough. We have a full-time alarm administrator, I don't know, she's probably half-time because she does work for the police department as well. But it's $20. And yes, it's a 50% increase, but it's $10, and the net is it's only gone up. If we haven't raised it in, 14 years, so it's a net of under 3% a year. We have a lot of other things that we are also going to do. We would like to rewrite the ordinance. That's partially because of new technology. People are self-installing equipment and dispatching from their cell phone when they're not home. So we want to include that. There's also a lot of ambiguity that we've noticed in people coming, when they come to us for appeals, and we'd like to eliminate some of that stuff. But this is a first thing, is giving an extra $100,000 to the town every year.
So I should have said, I can't remember if I did, that this is Rick Brooks, and he's the chairman of the Alarm.
That's correct. Alarm Appeals Board.
Just a question, on the Alarm Appeals Board, how many individuals are there? Are you guys volunteers, or?
We're all volunteer with the exception, you talking about, do we get paid to be on the board?
Well, no, I'm just
No.
trying to understand, it looks like you guys have thought this through, right? So you want to go from X to Y, the extra $100,000 is going to help you all. It's offset.
It's not really going to help us at all. It's going to help the general fund.
Right, sorry, yes, but it's going to offset some of the costs that are incurred from sending out, sending out the police or the fire, right? Is that the idea here of?
Well,
because it's not, you're not really.
it doesn't really affect their budgets. The idea is, in order to reduce the number of responses, which is not just what it costs to roll a truck, but the fact is every time you roll an emergency vehicle, you're taking a risk that you're going to hurt somebody because you're breaking traffic laws, even with lights and siren. It's been a while, but I've been a volunteer firefighter, I just finished about 40 years. When I joined, we used to lose fire trucks on a relatively regular, and police cars on a relatively regular basis. It has improved significantly, but you're still taking a risk every time you dispatch. So we want fewer calls. Why we're asking for more money is, frankly, $20 isn't enough. People don't, it's going to be 2024.
No, the comment I'm making is, so I have no problem with going from 20 to 30. I pay this annual fee once a year, so I agree with you. It's not a 50% increase, it's a $10 increase. I got that. But the actual registration fee doesn't discourage my house from having false alarms.
No, the registration fee helps pay for the alarm administrator and the cost of mailing invoices, et cetera.
I gotcha.
Which then allows us to find people who
I got you.
do stupid things.
That makes sense.
And that's a good portion of it.
Okay. No problem with the increase.
And we'll be back for other things. We want to modernize our system, so we may ask for some money to, again, reduce the number of appeals and reduce the ongoing expense. Right now, we have no way of collecting email addresses so that every single registration invoice goes out in the US mail.
How many false alarms do you get, and how many appeals do you get per annum?
Most of our appeals are actually on people who didn't register. We haven't had a lot of equipment appeals and, people doing the wrong thing. I think because we're pretty strict on it now. We used to have a lot of people who came before us who were frequent flyers, and we had to pursue in small claims court. I think that has helped a lot. We typically, a lot of people pay their fines for false alarms. Most of our appeals, like I said, have been for failure to register.
But because I think I've had a false alarm, it's like $100 or something, right, for a false alarm?
Your first false alarm
Is
every
waived.
year is free. Then the second one is $50, the third one is
Very nominal,
$200,
yeah.
et cetera. One thing that procedurally we're going to change, right now, if you have not registered your alarm, you still get the free false. We've noticed that other communities don't do that. So they only give the free false alarm every year to people who have actually bothered to register.
That would be a good change.
So in Stanford, it says right on their website, if you have a false alarm and you're unregistered, that's $240. $120 for the failure to register and $120 for the false. So we're getting stricter and we're reducing the number. We're seeing fewer appeals. Like I said, we had to meet extra times for appeals last year, but most of them were for people who didn't register. And the response is always, I didn't get the mail. I saw the mail, but I thought it was for something else. I ignored it. And our response typically is, do you tell your credit card companies the same thing?
Do you know if a home has an alarm? Do you already know that, or until we register it? Only when we register it is when you,
There's two ways we find out if people have an alarm. One is they register it, and two is they have a false alarm for not registering.
Yeah.
Our plan is to work with the police department to find out if there's a legitimate alarm and an unregistered. Right now, we have no way of capturing that. So if somebody tries to break into your house, you have an alarm which you never registered. We don't know that yet. We want to know that because we want to be able to tell the people, find the people for failure to register.
So I was trying to link this proposal to cost, right? So that you're increasing the fee to cover your cost, but what you're really trying to do is, one, cover the cost, clearly also make it more important to people to follow the program. And, I mean, because your costs of mail and an administrative assistant, $182,000, you're probably not, that may be reasonably within your cost, right? So you're going to be increasing that amount to have more revenue. Now, the cost of the town is higher because we have the cost for the rolling stock and the time where people are out of position and other things are not being properly covered. But that revenue is not getting to those departments. And I don't know if that revenue
It doesn't go to us
changes
either.
behavior. Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't go to, I mean, it's hard with everything going to the general fund to,
And I know for years I had to fill out the pink form in triplicate. It changed, right? It's now a simpler form, but it's still not online, is it?
the form is a fillable PDF, which is available online.
And does
It's
it have to
not
be
an
mailed?
online form.
Does it have to be mailed back, or can it?
It can be emailed back.
submitted? It can be emailed, so you've made it easier for homeowners to
I actually
comply.
personally made it easier. I made the form.
I agree, it should be online, though. You should be able to pay online.
We would love to have it online. There's, one of the things that one of the goals for the next year is to figure out how we can do that. The problem is, it's not just putting it online. You have to have it so it integrates with the CAD system for the police, which has restrictions on it. It's not as simple as saying, yes, we should allow you to register it online.
Can't we do like even property taxes and stuff? Like everything is now moved on, like there is an option you go, there's a couple things I see on.
Because somebody developed, a company outside the town developed the ability to run the property tax system, and all the towns have moved to
No.
outsourcing that.
But your comment about this SNP has to interact with the police department. I mean, you right now just get a physical or an email. Someone's inputting the data into the, wherever you need it to be in the town system.
Yes, so, but if we wanted to make, a form that, I guess theoretically, we could just make an online form and it just creates a document which then gets keyed in, but that would be kind of counterproductive
So
to
this
do
is
it
a
twice.
little beyond our scope too.
Right.
But I think the parking department, does everything online. So it no longer pays postage. It also doesn't take cash, it's just only credit cards, nothing else. So you just might talk with the parking department,
They have a.
which
there's
is
a-
also the police department.
Yes, there is a custom software program that tracks all the alarm appeals that was made many, many years ago. And in order to do that, we'd need to get money from you to hire a company to do those modifications. So that's on our to-do list, is to make it happen, but we have to come up, there's more steps.
Right.
If I could just do an online Google form or something like that, I would love to do that.
So does everyone feel comfortable to increase this alarm fee by
I mean-
50% or $10?
It's kind of just an arbitrary number that you selected, that going from 20 to 30 is, because I'm just wondering how you thought about it.
It's arbitrary.
Okay.
I think he already.
We thought, looking at how long it's been since it was raised, and I think I was on the committee back then too, on the board. We thought it was, we wanted to raise it, and if, frankly, to do this for $5, to bother to raise it for $5, then we'd have to come back in 2 years and ask you to do it again, so.
Sometimes what happens is when you raise your fee, you get less compliance, right? But I don't know if this is.
I don't
this
think that's
gets
going to happen
there,
here,
right.
because everybody does get, first of all, when people say they didn't get the bill, we show them their list of payments for the past decade, and they say, you paid it every year in June for 10 years. It's in June. Put it on your calendar. But I didn't get I didn't get the letter. But you paid $20 in June every year, so I don't think we're going to have less compliance. It's half a dozen people, 4 times a year or something, so maybe 25 people who say they didn't get the mail.
All right, I'll make the motion to approve, to recommend an increase in the alarm ordinance fee to $30.
And I'll second it.
Motion made by Leslie Moriarty, second by Nisha Arora. In this case, it just is,
I'd say routine. If somebody wants to talk about it again, they can let Dan know.
okay.
Does that mean I don't have to come on Tuesday?
But Dan Ozesmere, who's not here now,
And
he can make a decision to make it non-routine.
And we can ask our staff,
But
as you put the
Roland,
agenda together, if you can communicate.
Okay.
If you're needed.
He
one
knows
way
how
or
to find me.
Or he can email you, whatever he.
Either way.
Okay, did we vote 3? Oh, excuse me.
We haven't voted yet.
So that passed unanimously, 300. Thank you, Rick, very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
So our next topic is budget guidelines. And so we've had a meeting at the very end of last week on this. And I think we're very close to moving forward with our budget guidelines, including working on the numbers together, some of the numbers together.
What do you
we
think
don't
of the
yet have any
timing?
written.
Yeah,
I think that, I thought,
because at some point, it doesn't make sense to have guidelines. Right. All right, so let's get,
So,
we can take that offline.
we'll, by early next week, we'll come up with the timing. Do I have a motion to approve minutes? We have the regular meeting minutes of October 11th.
The only change, and it may not be necessary to change, but on the minutes for October 11th, when we got to,
October 11th, wait a second, can you just give me 1
so
second,
it's
please?
the second,
11th,
no, well,
October 11th, what?
it's the multi-use path discussion that we had.
Right.
And when we got to SE3, the resolution, what's in the meeting, in the minutes, it says it was treated as a first read and no action was taken. But I guess above it, it says it indicates our discussion. So, all right, I remove that. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor?
Aye. And same motion for October 24th, if we're doing them separately.
And I'll second it.
Those in favor? Aye. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, it says chair's report. We have no chair's report unless, at this point in time.
I think we should extend this meeting further. It hasn't been long enough.
Do we have a motion to
Laptop's about to
adjourn?
die. Motion, you make the motion, Leslie?
Adjourn at 5:02, at
No,
5:03.
I'll second it.
Those in favor? Aye. And our next meeting will be held on Tuesday, December 5th at 1 PM in the Town Hall Meeting Room. Again, that's early in the month. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Pete and Roland. This has been a very long meeting.